Okay, welcome everyone. I'd like to call our Public Hearings Committee to order. I would like to remind everyone that our meetings are web streamed and televised, and I would ask that you ensure your phones are on silent mode and to keep your camera on, mute yourself when not speaking, and of course remember to unmute yourself if speaking, and please use the Microsoft Teams raise hand featured icon to be called upon if you're in a virtual attendee, and to remove it after you're finished. So the first item, any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Being none, the approval of the agenda.
Chair.
I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as amended to replace Appendix J of 4.5 Staff Report CD 22-043. By Councillor Rabbit, second by Councillor Huffman. All in favor? That is carried. I now officially open the public meetings held under the Municipal Act, the Planning Act, and County Policy. Please be advised that to preserve your right to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, you are required to make comments or provide written submissions prior to the passage of a bylaw. It is important to note that no final decisions are being made on these matters today. These matters are to allow the public to provide initial comments, and further reports will come forward at a future date. First item on the agenda is CD-22-043, an application ZNPL 2022-062. An application has been received to amend the zoning bylaw to permit an animal hospital as a site-specific provision to the agricultural zoning of the subject property. J.H. Colhoun Engineering Limited, on behalf of Eric Elver and Dr. Emily Zakrasek, has put forth the application affecting the lands described as 522 Talbot Road 3. And Hannelore Yeager, are you going to present this report?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I will be available to present the report. May I just confirm to the chair that the clerks will be sharing the presentation?
Getting a little feedback.
Hannah, do you need us to put up the presentation for you?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Through the chair, the subject property is located at 522 Talbot Road, located west of Delhi. The surrounding land uses are predominantly agricultural, with approximately 12 residential lots containing single-family homes located along Talbot Road at an approximate maximum distance of 265 meters from the subject lands. The subject lands have 2 official plan designations and 2 zones. It is designated and zoned agricultural in the northern portion of the lot, and designated and zoned hazard lands in the southern portion of the lot. There is also a natural heritage system feature overlay of significant woodlands. Next slide, please. The subject proposal is to amend the zoning bylaw to add a site-specific provision to permit the use and construction of a 224 square meter animal hospital. The use would facilitate service provision to both domestic pet owners and farm livestock in the immediate and surrounding areas. This development would also include 10 parking spaces and 1 accessible parking space to be in conformity with the zoning bylaw of Norfolk County. Next slide, please. The reports submitted as part of a complete application include a conceptual site plan sketch, floor plans, and building elevation drawings, a stormwater management report, a traffic impact brief, and a letter from Norfolk County's Forestry Operations Supervisor confirming that the proposed building is not anticipated to occupy lands within or adjacent to the significant woodlands on site and thus would not represent a hazard on their ecological form and feature. The agency comments
Sultan
is now joining.
The agency comments provided include a confirmation from Development Engineering that a functional servicing report or brief, a potential revised stormwater management report and drawing, and traffic impact brief will be further reviewed at the site plan application stage, a recommendation from the Agreements and Development Coordinator that a holding provision be placed on the property until the owner provides the complete engineering drawings, performance securities, and enters into a development agreement, and that Norfolk Fire requires that adequate access is provided for the fire department apparatus. Next slide, please. With regards to public input, a resident who identified themselves as a neighbor requested drawings of the proposed building, but did not submit any further comments. Next steps are that planning staff are currently preparing a recommendation report for council's consideration on May 17th. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Yeager. Are there questions for staff from the committee? Councilor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Deputy Mayor. And my question is with respect to a significant number of pages, 40 some pages in here that have some documentation. I believe it's the archaeological study. Is this something that's requested and required? Like, it seems like an awful lot of work and an awful lot of paper that's being printed. And I just wonder why we're getting it. I think just a statement identifying that this has been done would suffice. I don't find any benefit with all this material in here on the 40 some pages. I'd like your comments, please.
Looks like Brandon, you gonna handle this one or?
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair, there often are a number of appendices to detailed engineering reports. They are technical in nature. I think in the county's interest of being as open and transparent with the information for development applications and technical studies, it's submitted and part of the agenda. We do recognize it is a significant amount of paper. We may not be printing it as much, but one solution we'll look at is we do post these on a planning website, and so maybe we can just include a link to it.
I think that would suffice.
Any other questions from committee for staff? Seeing none, we have the applicant's agent, Mr. Phillips. Would you be making a presentation or are you just here to answer questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm just here to answer any questions you might have. Probably a more detailed presentation at the meeting for approval if required. But I'm just here to answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions from committee for the applicant's agent, Councilor Columbus?
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. And I notice on page 4 of the agenda, right at the bottom, it states no overnight stay of animals is being proposed for the site. But I know that these individuals have 2 horses, I believe, so I would think that they're going to stay at the site. And is that correct assumption?
Yes, I believe that's the case. I'm not sure if the applicant's with us today, but I believe that's the case.
Thank you.
Councilor Martin?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Actually, more of a procedural question for you. Would it not be in the best interest for the agent to do the presentation now instead of at a later date? This is a public hearing where we try to share all that information with the public. And then when it comes back to council, that's the only opportunity for council then to follow up with questions. So if there are concerns from the public, I'm just thinking that message should be maybe articulated to the agent, it's okay if they don't want to share something today, but typically now would be the appropriate time for that, would it not?
Well, I suppose it depends if the, it's up to the agent and the applicant to decide, and if he has one prepared, we'd be happy to listen to it. If he's not prepared, then here to answer questions. So we will leave it up. Mr. Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the planner's done a good job of outlining the application. It's not very detailed. It's not very complicated in the request. So I think at this time we're fine.
There was a need to, if something new comes up out of this one, then that they will present the evidence required. Councilor Vanendry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I think this is either to the applicant or the applicant's agent. I'm just curious why and I'm very much looking forward to seeing an animal hospital there. To me, it would be great because we are short veterinarians. Why that the animals can't stay overnight? Can I ask that question? Why is that posed? If I brought an animal and could it not stay overnight?
Certainly, we don't want to restrict that in the sense of, if there's a sick animal that needs attention overnight. But this isn't like a boarding house where they're going to be there all the time.
Oh, I see.
That's the nature.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. I totally agree. I'm hoping that we are getting a full facility if that's what you're proposing. That in the animal care, if it's required that the animal can stay overnight, but not on a permanent basis, what you're saying.
That's the intent.
That's the intent, right? Because it's not clear to me. I'm getting the impression that for the applicant, we're going to establish an animal hospital, but nobody gets to stay overnight. But this is not true. If the animals that come to visit and are being treated, that they can stay overnight, or there will be accommodations to keep the animals overnight. Correct? Correct?
That's the intention, yes.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Mr. Sloan, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, thanks, through the chair. That's from a zoning standpoint and a use standpoint, that is just to differentiate. The staying overnight or longer term would be more of a kennel or a boarding for animals, which is a slightly different use than the animal hospital. Of course, as part of the animal hospital, an accessory to that is the occasional overnight stay.
Councilor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this application started in September of 2020. What has kept it so long from coming back for hearing process? Any indication was it on our part as the county, or is it on the applicant's part that's slowed things up?
I can't say that it's on the county's part because our involvement, it's only been sort of around the Christmas period to help the applicant make the required submissions, reports, etc.
Thank you. I see Mr. Sloan, perhaps.
Yeah, Mr. Sloan, you want to explain, what is there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different addendums to the report, right? Takes time to do them.
Yeah, thanks, through the chair. I know that the original circulation occurred, and then there's the time of getting the technical comments and making sure that matters are addressed to the best of the ability before bringing it forward. I know there is some urgency, and we've been in communication with this owner applicant about the nature of animal hospitals and the significant need to move forward quickly with this. So although we did have some staff turnover in the planning area, other staff have done an admirable job of picking this up and bringing this forward to committee and council to finish it off.
Thank you.
Thank you. And any other questions? Seeing none, is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Mr. Deputy Clerk, is there anybody else registered on this one? So there's no members of the public. Does anyone wish to move the staff recommendation or propose an alternative? Councillor Columbus, seconded by Councillor Van Andrieschie. All in favor? That is carried. Everyone.
Thank you.
The next report is CD-22-037, that NPL 2022-097 and OPNPL 2022-096, an official plan amendment application OPNPL 2022-096 and zoning amendment applications at NPL 2022-097 are proposing to add a special policy and provision to the existing residential commercial land use permissions in order to allow a retail store on the ground floor of the subject property. The owner, Nathan Q, has put forth the application affecting the land described as 6 Victoria Street, Simcoe. And Mr. Sloan, will you be presenting this report?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon. Further to folks stepping up to help our planning area, I'll be working on this particular file very briefly. It's an official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, southeast corner of Norfolk Street and Victoria Street. It's in to the southern edge of the downtown or the central business district. There's a number of residential dwellings in the vicinity. It's across the street from a law office, a funeral home to the south. The proposal before us is to allow for a retail store within the ground floor of a mixed-use building. So that would be a building that would contain residential dwelling units. Some may be familiar with this particular site and the property beside it, and the history and some of the challenges with this particular site. The current owner has demolished the building at 12 Victoria. No plans currently in place that we are aware of for that one, but at 6 Victoria, the owner has done some renovations. There's a number of dwelling units in there, and we are looking at a site-specific policy and provision to allow the retail store. A site concept plan was submitted. So far, the agency comments have not turned up any issues. We are looking at accessibility and the driveway entrance and any kind of screening from the parking, make sure there's enough parking. We've now received, as of today, 5 responses from the public. They've highlighted a number of issues. The circulations were provided to this committee so that you're aware, and they will be included in their entirety and addressed in the follow-up recommendation report. But for today, just to summarize, there's a number of concerns with the type of retail business. They're indicating that it's much more than retail, as a cannabis store is proposed at this location. And there's a number of concerns and questions about that type of retail and how it's been considered as general overall retail within the report to date. Some of the concerns indicate that this is primarily a residential area or along this block, limited commercial activity. There's a number of comments about the downtown and how things have transitioned over the last many years, that there's similar types of this retail store that are proposed in the downtown area, but also that there's a number of vacancies of storefronts and available locations to consider there. There's also some concerns raised about it may take away from some of the housing rental needs, impact property values, making sure that the area is kept safe as you're mixing commercial businesses with residential, whether or not we're looking at short-term items or if we're considering the long-term and the future potential of the area. And there's a number of official plan policies that are cited that should be reviewed. The next steps would be to do the recommendation report. Can help with answering questions at this point in time. I do believe the owner applicant is on the line that may have a bit of a presentation as well and could be available for some questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sloan. Any questions for staff from the committee? Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Brandon, we didn't have the sensitive use really outlined within the report, the fact that this is going to be a potential cannabis retailer. Just looking for some comments back on why that was stated verbally, and we don't really have much information within the report. Is that something we could expect should this go through in the more fulsome report? Also, I'd be looking for some commentary. Council had made a decision in 2018 to permit cannabis sales through retail outlets. And we were told at that time, really our only ability to restrict cannabis sales once we bought in would be through the planning process. If we had them going in an area we deemed inappropriate, say residential area, that this in fact would be the only way that council would be able to stop such a enterprise from being erected. I was just looking for some commentary back on that. If we're looking for more information in the next report and maybe why that was omitted at this stage.
Through the chair, yes, that's generally correct, as you've indicated, that when cannabis was legalized and there was a number of reviews as to what that meant from a land use or zoning perspective, it was determined, and it has been determined anyway, that you can't necessarily distinguish or discriminate the type of retail necessarily, that it is within the category of retail similar to the sale of other products. And so as Councillor Rabbits indicated, you can, from a municipal land use zoning standpoint, determine it based on whether or not retail would be appropriate for a property or for an area. The report considered that it's retail. And so from the planning standpoint, from the land use amendment to the official plan and the zoning, it was looked at whether or not retail of any form, whatever it may be selling, is appropriate and is being considered. And so the report did address it as the application was for retail. It has been communicated in the comments from the submissions about cannabis. And yes, the follow-up recommendation report will have some additional information about that type of retail and the sale of cannabis that's being considered and some of the response to that. I think the applicant may want to provide some additional response as well. But for now, thank you.
The application is dealing whether we allow for a convenience store, and the cannabis is one of the items that will be legally for sale at a convenience store. But we're not approving a cannabis store. We're reviewing the actual property, whether it's there would be a good use to put a convenience store there, right? There's a subtle difference there, but that's what the agree with cannabis or not. That's what the rules are nowadays in this country. Councillor Van Andriessen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Brandon. Since it's a zoning, can you tell me if there's a school zone in the area, or say, for instance, playground or activity zone area?
Through the chair, there is not one that is directly in the vicinity. In addition to whatever the municipal zoning requirements are, my understanding is that an AGCO license is required, and there are some considerations about surrounding uses, and there's also a public process, I believe, for getting a license for said store as well, in terms of notification. But I'm just double checking on the map, and there is nothing within the vicinity. It's residential zones, downtown zone, and the residential commercial business zone. There's an institutional zone further to the east on Victoria Street, but that's the Hydro building and the municipal buildings that we have.
So how far down Victoria would there be if there is a school? Is there not? How far down would, say,
I
Joe's?
think the nearest one is up past Donnelly, by Donnelly Drive, down
Okay, so that
Victoria
would,
Street.
that would
Name of
be
that school.
their distance.
Look to one of our Ward 5 counselors. What's the name of the school out there?
St. Joe's, yeah. How far would you say St. Joe's is?
There we go. So I don't have the exact measurement, but it's essentially the entrance to Oakwood Cemetery. St. Joseph School would be the closest point if you're to draw it out on a map. I believe it's over the 150 meters. Is that what was part of the legislation in the province, that it could not be permitted within 150 meters, I want to say, of the school zone?
We'll ask
Thank you,
staff
Mr.
to
Chair.
identify them in the final report, maybe on a larger scale map. Any other questions from committee for staff? Mr. Sloan, you have a comment yet, or?
Through the chair, I was just doing some measurements. It's over 1,000 meters. And just for clarification on an earlier question too, the convenience store is currently permitted. So currently there could be the sale of many things in addition to this, but full retail is not permitted, and so that's what's proposed here.
Thank you, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Brandon. What steps, if any, do our planning staff take in this particular situation when an application comes forward for rezoning, official plan amendment, and so on, to encourage a business owner or proponent of a new concept as such to go to the central business district directly and infill in the countless vacant storefronts that are available?
Through the chair, there are a few matters. So one, yes, that was a question that was asked of whether or not that is the potential. There is the consideration that there are a number of retail outlets that have a similar sales product to this that are in the downtown area. We cannot necessarily force somebody to purchase land downtown for their business or to lease land downtown. But we can have those conversations. The owner does have this property and is proposing it on their property. Part of it is how the application, I guess, is considered through council as well, and kind of the stance that we take on retail. I won't provide too many comments now, but just recognizing that the retail landscape has really changed, and retail isn't only permitted in downtown Simcoe.
Thank you, Brandon. Any other questions? And we do have the applicant available. Mr. Q, would you wish to speak to this report? Make a presentation?
Hello, sir. Yes, I would. Good afternoon, councillors, mayor, and all the public online. If you could bear with me, if I mute my mic for a second to catch my breath, I'm just feeling under the weather. My name is Nathan Q. I'm the owner of 6 Victoria. I purchased this property as my first home. At that point, I knew it needed some work. I say that lightly as I was unsure of the work that it needed, as I was in the Yukon on deployment as a wildland firefighter. To my surprise, to come home and see what these properties had come to. My first time coming home was to be sworn at and told to leave, and the tenants were swearing as I tried to explain that I wanted to move into my home. 1 year later, dozens of police calls, from someone hiding with a gun to a stabbing, including the SWAT team having to enter. It was a hard year. I couldn't get any rent or even find the person at the house half the time, as there was many people coming and going. I would show up to find people passed out, needles and beer cans all around them, having to call paramedics and police. The needles became so bad that the garbage service refused to pick up my garbage. The day I stepped into the house for the first time, a layer of filth, feces all over the floor, nicotine stains dripping down the walls. The pile of garbages and the rats, dead and living all over the house, attic to basement, under beds, in dressers. I could not believe what I have done to myself. I thought about tearing the house down, saving myself from a needle poke or lung disease. I'm proud of the work I have done and the memories I have made, not only from working with my father, but to talking with the community and the people driving by honking or stopping by and thanking me for the work I've done. Every day was an adventure. One day working on the house, I smelled something burning. I thought, oh no, I left the heater on. At that moment, my neighbors came out screaming, the flames shooting out the back of the window, and the second story window facing Norfolk flies open. A lady screaming for help. I dropped my tools, grabbed my ladder, and went to help. After the incident was over, the fire chiefs came over, thanked me for what I had done, and mentioned how great the corner was looking. This meeting is about a retail conversion for the property I'd worked so hard on. It makes this is a great location with already existing parking, which makes the property much more attractive for a downtown retail space. The city's master plan states expanding retail spaces wherever possible and practical. We have methadone clinics, vape stores, cannabis stores, lawyer's office, retirement homes, Hydro One, a brewery, funeral home, pool bar, retail outlets, and many other businesses within hundreds of meters of this location. This being on the second busiest street and on another main artery out of town. I think this area is turning around, and having young entrepreneurs come in and work hard and build businesses and create industry is a good thing. This property currently could be a corner store, private club, or laundromat. I don't think retail is too far-fetched. As a convenience store, I could sell alcohol and tobacco. There is designated residential commercial, and anyone across the road could open a retail outlet without a conversion. I understand a few people in the area who are worried about what type of retail may be in use. I've talked with a number of people, and after reading the comments and discussing with them, showing them that this is my home, I live here, and bringing them into the retail space to show them what I have done, they have told me I have put their mind at ease. I have explained to them that this meeting is only about the zoning change and not about what business might be in hereafter, and I invite them and anyone else in the public to contact the AGCO Alcohol Gaming Commission to file complaints or concerns, as the specific business is under my name and has not been finalized. I also welcome anyone I have not talked with to come by, and I will explain the business and the substantial security requirements through the process of licensing the AGCO. They check vulnerable people, businesses, and make sure that the site is suitable and requires significant security requirements. I believe, I understand that people would have liked more notice about the type of retail, and I do apologize. I had notices up a few months prior. I want to thank the City of Simcoe employees and councillors for listening to me today and helping over the past few months with the phone calls and meetings and troubleshooting. Most of the public comments I have read are around that retail cannabis going in this location, and I invite you to contact the AGCO or me once again. I hope council looks at this objectively as a retail change. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. Are there any questions for the applicant from the committee? Councillor Rabbits.
Thank you, and through you, thank you, Mr. Q, for attending this afternoon. My question is with regards to the company that is currently posted at 12 Victoria Street. I believe it's called Rolling Papers. Are you the owner and operator of this business? And do you have an agent that is helping you with this planning application? My concern is that the posting is already up on the website. It would seem a bit presumptuous to be advertising at this juncture in time, and was hoping for some comments back from you as to why this has taken place.
Yes, that is my company, sir. The website was posted months prior. It was not meant to go live prior to the business opening, but there was some confusion over the opening date, and that is kind of why the website's already online.
I do want to comment, Mr. Q, that I do appreciate what you have done to the corner. It was absolutely in a very poor condition and definitely a public health hazard. So you do have my commendation for the work that you've put in to cleaning up that lot. I would just leave you with the comment that I was hoping to see that be a retail, but not a retail operation, and provide housing, affordable housing for the community. So I really appreciate what you've done in terms of cleaning up the space. I was hoping to see that not be a sensitive land use, but providing more homes, especially to those vulnerable clients that you had as tenants. You've really cleaned up the space, and that would be a much more suitable place for a residential development. Thank you.
Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Q, do you currently live in the dwelling?
Yes, sir, I live here.
Thank you.
Also, if I could add one thing, sir.
Yeah, go ahead.
Prior to buying this unit and the unit next door, I wouldn't consider these properties housing. So since I've purchased them and fixed them up, we have 2 more units for rent. One currently I live in, and one currently I have rented out to another young individual. So that we did add 2 more residential spaces, and I do plan on adding more eventually. But I do see this corner as a beautiful retail first story with apartments above, allowing for more growth and more units eventually.
Hey, thank you. For years, I thought that corner was just an extra parking lot for a couple of BP cruisers that they didn't know where to put. Any other questions for the applicant? Being none, thank you, Mr. Q. We have a Robert Canali listed as a speaker. Mr. Canali, would you want to present your deputation?
Yes, please, thanks. My name is Rob Canali. My wife and I, I'm going to say it, it's redacted out, but I can say it. I live at 154 Norfolk Street South in Simcoe. You have a copy, I believe, members of council, etc. I have a copy of our written submissions. You have names of the people we're also representing. I'm a local lawyer in town as well. Have a construction law practice. I'm the house across the street that Mr. Sloan, through the chair, has indicated there's a law office across the street. Not entirely true anymore. We moved the office from Norfolk and Stanley over to the old mechanics library on Peel Street. At any rate, Ruth Ann Carlisle is also across the street, immediately to the south of us. Tony and Michelle are across the street in the other direction, kitty corner to the building in question. Daryl and Tracy are one house down. So we've got the 4 houses across the street sort of lined up in opposition to this proposal. In addition, we have Tim and Amy who are down the street on Victoria on the other side of the subject premises and on the other side of the lot that was torn down. Julie, if I could have the next slide, please. Our objections fall into 3 categories. The first is, as Mr. Sloan indicated, this is much more than a retail operation, and I'll pause and come off our slideshow a little bit here and comment on what we've heard so far in the discussion today. Part of the theme that we're going to be highlighting today is that it's bad planning to think of this as simply the idea that we might consider retail in the mixed use areas as designated. The type of retail matters. And through the chair to Mr. Q, I share Councillor Rabbit's view that all of us in the neighborhood are very happy with what you did. We're happy you bought it. We're happy that you tore down 12 Victoria, ecstatic by that, ecstatic at the work that you've done. And we don't want you to take this personally. Our concern is as much about what's happening across the street from us, but also from the perspective, as Mr. Rabbits sort of indicated in his questioning, that once we open the door to allow retail in these areas that are predominantly residential, we're opening the door to allow similar types of retail in other areas in this CBR zone. And I want to speak to that a little bit as we go along. The first objection is that this is much more than simply retail, and the type of retail matters. We're also going to suggest to you, respectively, members of council and staff, that the proposal runs in many ways contrary to the official plan. And then finally, and this has been highlighted already, that it's really not necessarily. There are available spaces downtown, and the official plan contemplates that we should really try to focus on that before we move outside of the downtown core. Before I go to the next slide, yeah, I thank Mr. Pugh through the chair for acknowledging that the advertisement went up as a mistake. Rolling Cannabis is online and advertising right now, as Councillor Rabbits has acknowledged, in more than one fashion, and we have provided for councillors through the clerk materials, which we understand have been circulated and will be included in the post agenda materials. We also note in what we provided that there are currently 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cannabis retail operations in Simcoe already for the council's consideration. Next slide, please, Julie. So it's much more than retail. The proposal, of course, asks for a clarification that a retail store on the ground floor is permitted. And through the chair to Mr. Sloan, I understand that's the request, and I've heard you today suggest that you can't really differentiate between types of retail, and that you're either in retail or you're not. We will respectfully have to disagree, and we do believe that it's bad planning not to have considered the type of retail, particularly in this type of zone. What is proposed, as we're all now coming to understand, is a cannabis retail operation. And as Councillor Rabbits indicated, the report doesn't even include the word cannabis. We submit that the proposal in a predominantly residential neighborhood goes well beyond whether a simple retail store should be allowed in the areas. Next slide, please, Julie.
If I could, Mr. Canali, I forgot.
Absolutely.
That we have a 5-minute time limit on this.
5 minutes. Okay, I thought it was 15. I guess I was working off.
I'll give you a minute to summarize.
Oh, I wish you told me the 5 minutes previously. At the end of the day, members of council, the type of use is critical. If you look in the materials, we're not just talking about the use across the street from our premises. You need to ask yourselves whether or not the type of retail use would be appropriate in any of the areas where the CRB designation, the mixed residential commercial zone, is allowed. Do you want them up on Lyndhurst by the park? Do you want them on the other side of the park? Is that an appropriate use? You should also ask yourself whether or not you should be asking about the type of use. Julie, if you could flip through to, keep flipping scribes till I tell you to stop, please. Go, stop there. This is what's allowed in a CRB zone, and you will see that that a convenience store is included in the list, as Mr. Sloan indicates. So from a planning perspective, you have already considered what type of retail should be allowed, and you've limited it to a convenience store. And now you're talking about opening it up to literally, as Mr. Sloan indicates, any type of retail. Well, where's it going to stop? Cannabis, guns, porn, adult products? From a planning perspective, you need to think, and respectfully, you need to consider that the type of retail matters. There are spaces available downtown where this type and the other types of retail that we're talking about can go, and council, in our respectful submission, needs to think very long and hard before they simply open the barn door to any type of retail and say, oh, well, we'll let the powers that be control the licensing of cannabis from a licensing perspective. We'll let the province deal with it. That's how we get ourselves in trouble from a planning perspective. There is no reason why cannabis needs to be in a residential neighborhood, and there is every reason to be at least cautious that the lifestyle issues potentially, because we're not anti-cannabis, but there are potential issues that come with cannabis, that also comes with brew pubs, that also comes with beer stores and liquor stores and pharmacies that aren't allowed in this area, that ought not be allowed in predominantly residential neighborhoods. We cannot oppose the proposition strongly enough on the basis that, you know, this isn't just a NIMBY thing. It's the entire CRB zone. And I don't want that zone to become known as the, you know, the CPD zone, where people who have an extra room can open up a CBD zone, where people can open up an additional cannabis store, because once you open the barn door, you've opened the barn door. I appreciate what Mr. Q has done, but this, on the level of planning that's gone into this, respectfully, it should be a zone-wide determination about whether or not we're going to allow cannabis stores, other types of retail beyond convenience stores, and if so, what types of uses? Because it's not as simple as saying on a home-by-home basis, we're going to open up retail, and maybe it'll be cannabis, and maybe it will be porn. Thank you for our submissions.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the deputation? Councillor Rabbits, if you word the question properly, you'll give him a chance to present the rest of his deputation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, that is my intention. Apologies, Mr. Canale, for not informing you of the 5-minute minimum before you began your presentation. I imagine you were preparing for 10 minutes.
Right.
Was there any key slides? We won't put the presentation back up, but was there any summary comments that you could provide that you weren't able to touch on within your presentation? I think we've gotten the key points, but I just want to ensure you've taken the time to prepare a very detailed letter, and I want to make sure that the parties that you're representing as well have their say. We could have each and every one come and give us 5 minutes, but you're very cognizant of our time, and I appreciate that. So I wanted to make sure you had your opportunity to represent those that have asked you for assistance in this regard.
And through the chair, thank you, Mr. Roberts, much appreciated. I would ask you to have a quick look at the slide dealing with the Cannabis License Act. It's one of only 3. If you Google it, there's federal legislation and there's at least 3 pieces of provincial legislation that govern this. And I've hit some highlights in there in terms of why the larger levels of government in our nation are still continue to treat cannabis as a controlled substance. And I'd like you to look at that because it's there for a reason. And we should keep that in mind when we think about why we might not want cannabis to be sold in our neighbors, in our residential neighborhoods. So that's one I would point to. I would also point to, I'd ask you to look at the CRB zone and the slide that we had up previously, where all of the uses are identified. And if I didn't make it clear enough, allow me to state it this way. A lot of planning work has gone into what specific uses should be allowed within that zone. This is a very detailed list. Indeed, it breaks down the type of dwelling units into 6 different dwelling units. We ought not, in our respectful submission, be throwing the baby out with the bathwater by second guessing this work and deciding that we're going to simply allow retail of any kind. There are 31 items on this list. Only one of them is retail, and you'll note that with convenience stores, they limit the amount of space available. It was good planning that went into this list, and respectfully, it would be bad planning to simply open it up and say retail doesn't matter what kind. The actual CRB zones are itemized in the slide there, and I would have asked Council just to consider how many non-residential uses are on those streets. On Linwood, there's the Art Center. I can't think of any more. Coming north of Yonge Street, there's a few. There's a Taylor. There's a few other things. A lot of them are historical uses, but it's not a neighborhood where I would think. And let's keep in mind that the people on Linwood and the people on Kent and the people on Colburn didn't necessarily get notice of what was happening here today. And yet we're opening the barn door to say that in a CBD zone, CRB zone, it's going to be appropriate to have these types of uses. And we would ask you to think about that. And I have, for what it's worth, and I know that in the recommendations report, Mr. Sloan will speak to this, but we have taken some time in our submissions to take the councillors to the portions of the official plan which we say weigh in favor of denying the application. And overly simply put, it's talking about preserving not just the residential buildings, but the residential streetscape and the landscape. This proposal does not do that. The official plan also talks about prioritizing uses downtown if possible, as Councillor Martin, through the chair, indicated in her questioning, is a priority. The official plan calls for that. We talk about accommodating. And then lastly, I would ask you to have a look at the actual lot. And we have a slide in there where the actual lot is there. There's no backyard. There's no side yard. We're talking about a cannabis store. The front door of the cannabis store is going to be facing, as I understand it, south. We have 2 residential areas, and we're left with a front yard that is basically facing the corner of one of the busiest intersections in Simcoe. And so while I don't want to detract from our submission that this is an entire CRB zone issue, when we talk about this specific lot on this specific busy intersection, and while I understand that Mr. Q lives there, he may not live there forever. And once we've opened up the barn door, we're now talking about potentially the same lifestyle issues we had before. And those who are familiar with this site know that when you drove by Norfolk Street, as Mr. Q drove by Norfolk Street before he could get his tenants out, people were, they had tents out on the front lawn. And it was an embarrassment for all of Simcoe. And one of the things, Mr. Q, that I loved through the chair about what you were doing is, and my wife and I talked about it, we've got an opportunity to finally have a backyard where people don't need to party on the front street. And now we're paving the entire lot and leaving a little bit of landscape on the front. I think that's touching the highlights through the chair to Mr. Rabbits. I would encourage you to read through the planning excerpts that we've offered, because we do think they provide council with the ability to say no from a strict planning perspective. And if you look at the planning that's already occurred, I think you can come to the conclusion that the decision about what retail should go into the CRB zone has already been made. And with the greatest of respect through the chair to Mr. Sloan, this is anything but a clarification. To suggest that all we're doing is clarifying that retail should be allowed in this zone is with the greatest of respect to Mr. Sloan, because through the chair, I met with Mr. Sloan on a number of occasions and I quite like him, but it is nonsensical to suggest that this is a mere clarification. This is a complete overturn of the previous planning, which was restricted to convenience store retail on a very small scale. And now we're talking about completely undoing that and allowing unlimited retail. This isn't a clarification, it's a revolution. I hope those answered your question, Mr. Rabbits, and I apologize to council for the time.
Okay, thank you. And I apologize for not warning you ahead of time, but it seems you've got your full presentation in one way or the other. Any other questions for Councilor Columbus?
Yes, Mr. Kennelly, do you know whether this property is within the Simcoe business district of the BIA? Or is it?
I believe it's just outside the BIA. I believe the BIA covers downtown, and both our property and Mr. Q's property are outside. Across the street, though, Tony and Michelle, they're in the BIA zone. I do understand that, of course, the subject premises is subject to site plan control, and that would give council other things to consider about whether or not this should be allowed. But I didn't speak to that in my deputation.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Canali.
Thank you all.
Is anybody else registered, Mr. Deputy Clerk? Have anybody on the line? No. Is there's no one else? Would any member of the committee wish to move the staff recommendation or propose an alternative?
No, nobody moved it. Oh, wait a minute.
So you need a motion to accept the deputation from Mr. Canali first. Moved by Councilor Taylor, seconded by
No, it's just second. My mic went dead.
the staff recommendation. Would anybody like to move the staff recommendation or propose an alternative? Taylor, seconded by Rabbit. In favor of Councilor Plummer?
Mr. Chair, what does that actually mean? Except the staff recommendation that's printed on page 102. Does that mean we are in support of this application at this time? Further to the hearing? What is it exactly?
The staff recommendation is just to receive the that far. Have a different one. That the report ONPL 2022-096 and ZNPL 2022-097 be received as information, and that any comments received as part of the statutory public meeting be considered in future recommendation and staff report. So we're just receiving the report as information. There's no decision on it. Staff take all the input that they've got today from council and or from the committee and from any members of the public, and they will draft a recommendation at a future date, one way or the other, whether they support or oppose the application.
So we do have the opportunity to debate.
Yeah, all of the
Coming forward.
all of the items we're dealing with today, no decision is made. They're just received as information and take the input from the public.
Thank you.
So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. And do we want to take 5 minutes or we? Yeah, we'll take 5 minutes.
nothing we can hide.
I'm Connor.
And I'm Steven.
And we are
Norfolk County's Digital Service Squad.
We're here to let you know the digital
Let's fly around for Rick the Head. The way he lives is a magic trick. Sell him short, he'll pay you back. Gets around town in a Cadillac. Rick got a job about a year ago. Where no one knows. Always flashing old water gas. Cops
Are we ready to go back to work?
That's Rick the Hit, the man is slick. Rick the Hit, gin and tonic. Rick the Hit, psychedelic. Rick the Hit, what makes him tick? Nobody fools with Rick the Hit. The way he lives is a magic trick. Rick's got connections far and wide. He'll big stick by his side. All the ladies love Rick the Hit. All that money makes him sick.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. The next item on the agenda is 4.3. It's report CD 22-039, ONPL 2022-023, and ZNPL 2022-024. An application has been received to amend the Norfolk County official plan from downtown designation to downtown designation with a special policy area to permit a building of residential character with no commercial development on the ground floor, and to amend zoning bylaw 1Z 2014 from central business district to central business district, including a special provision to permit dwelling units to occupy the entire usable floor area of the first floor to facilitate the construction of a 3-story 18 dwelling unit apartment. Next Gen Rental Corporation, on behalf of Next Gen Rental Corporation and agent KH Cohoon Engineering Limited, has put forth the application affecting the lands described as 161 Wellington Avenue in the urban area of Delhi. Surprised I got through that. We have Ms. Canarito. Will you be presenting this report?
Yes, thank you. So through the chair, the applicant Next Gen Rental has applied for official plan and zoning bylaw amendments to facilitate the development of a 3-story apartment containing 18 dwelling units intended to be purpose-built rentals. The subject lands are located downtown within the urban area of Delhi at 161 Wellington Avenue and are currently vacant. They have been vacant for a number of years. There is a mix of commercial and residential uses within the surrounding area, and it should be noted that the lands were recently sold to the applicants by Norfolk County. The subject lands are identified as downtown designation in the official plan and central business district by the zoning bylaw. An official plan amendment was submitted to permit a residential development containing residential uses along the ground floor. Upon further review by staff, it is my opinion that the official plan amendment is not required to facilitate this development within the downtown designation. Official plan policy 7.8.1b specifies that buildings of commercial character shall only permit residential uses above the ground floor and within the rear of the ground floor, provided the frontage is utilized for commercial uses. The intent of this policy is to ensure that existing commercial buildings maintain ground floor space for commercial uses. Given the site has been vacant for a number of years, as I mentioned previously, and there is no existing building with commercial characters, it is staff's opinion that policy 7.8.1b does not apply. A zoning bylaw amendment is required to permit dwelling units to occupy the first floor of the new building. So provision 6.14 of the zoning bylaw requires that a minimum of 50% of the usable floor area of the first story and frontages be dedicated to retail, office, or service commercial. So a holding bylaw is also going to be recommended by staff to ensure that environmental concerns are addressed and archaeological review is completed in compliance with provincial legislation. Water and wastewater capacity is available and allocated, as well as approval of a site plan and the registration of the corresponding agreement. If the zoning bylaw is approved, a site plan application will be required to before building permits can be issued. The site plan application will review details such as landscaping, parking layout, garbage location, buffering, and the approval of final building elevations. So technical reports submitted to support the application include a planning justification report prepared by the Arnish Group, a traffic brief prepared by Cahoon Engineering, a shadow analysis prepared by Cahoon Engineering, geotechnical investigation report prepared by Englobe, as well as a phase 1 environmental site assessment prepared by Englobe. So circulation comments were provided by some of the technical agencies, and highlights include that social services and housing. Note that the purpose-built rentals within the downtown area of Delhi is helpful in addressing the community's needs for rental housing and supports the inclusion of barrier-free units. Development engineering has noted that all comments will be provided at the time of site plan submission. However, provide high-level comments regarding the proposed stormwater management proposal. Design development of the proposed infiltration system is required to ensure that the system meets the Norfolk County design criteria. So since preparing this PowerPoint presentation, 2 letters in opposition of the application have been received from the public, and a summary of the concerns I'll just list out. So drainage of the site and area, the proposed number of parking spaces not being sufficient to meet the needs of the development, shadowing, particularly in the winter months, access to light for surrounding residents, a reduction in the ability to enjoy one's property, visual intrusion, concerns that the construction will be detrimental to the health and welfare of the neighborhood, and a reduction in property values. So next steps, staff will prepare a council recommendation report identifying or addressing the concerns raised from today's meeting, and staff are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Any questions from committee for staff? Dan and Rishi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. I'm curious to ask if there are many empty spaces, business spaces in Delhi, and being the requirement that there should be some retail underneath this layer. But would you know how many are still vacant in the town of Delhi?
Through the chair, I don't have a specific number of vacancies in Delhi.
When we are looking at proposals such as these, when they're looking for a request to not have retail space at the underneath part in the front, wouldn't it be prudent to find out how many spaces are still available, whether it's required or not? Because there is a huge requirement for residential space. So I'm just wondering if that would be an option that we could look at as a council to find out whether there is lots of retail space available or not. Thank you.
Councillor Combs, do you want to comment on that question for Councillor Vanandrishi?
I would say that one of the issues we've had in the past in downtown Delhi is that there has been vacant stores. They may not be just like something new like this particular proposal, but they've been there, and I believe our economic development department has monitored that in the past. There is some new activity creating retail space within the Old Bank Montreal building, and also the new building being constructed just west of the Home Hardware. I would think that there is adequate space in the downtown to accommodate it.
Councillor Martin, did you have a question for staff?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, should council, should committee, sorry, be made aware of any grants that have occurred concerning this development for, given that they're the environmental assessment and now there is an exemption for the first story central commercial aspects? Has there been any grant funding that we should be made aware of before we look at approving it one way or another?
Through the chair, at this point, no grant funding, to my knowledge, has been awarded to the project.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Jennifer. We do have the applicant's agent here. I think Mr. Phillips. And I remind you,
I will try to keep it to the minimum. I think the planning staff has done a great job in outlining the proposal. As indicated, this is a 18-unit apartment building, 3 stories in height. The request here is primarily to delete the commercial component of this. We feel that it's a very small component, probably in the order of like 2,500 square feet that would be required under the bylaw if we were to comply with that. And through the owner and our knowledge of the area, there is significant space available in the downtown core. I'm going to guess it's probably over 30%. You know, that's in a business area where this is more predominantly a residential area. So we feel it's more appropriate there. We are aware of the comments received from the public, have done some investigation with staff about some of the technical matters, but certainly those will be addressed through the site plan approval process. You know, and those include the drainage, shadow, light, spillage on the properties. We have done a photometric drawing, which we believe complies with the county requirements, but that'll be subject to review. In this particular area, the current zoning bylaw does not require any parking for a development on this site. So theoretically, if we were just to build the residential component, even with a commercial component, we're not required to provide parking, but we think it's a good idea. The focus of the development is I'm going to use the word affordable housing, but affordable only in the sense of that it should be at a realistic price for the area. Not that it's subsidized in any way. There's been no grants extended to this property, nor have they been applied for. Short of that, I think I'd be happy to answer any questions that council might have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Phillips. Any questions for the applicant's agent? Seeing none, oh, Councilor Martin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Bit of an unorthodox question, and I'm putting you on the spot, the agent and the owner. Any consideration given to some type of donation to the local BIA, and similarly to a cash in lieu, or as we do for parkland and so on. But if council was to certainly work with you on this proposal, has there been any consideration in working with the local BIA to kind of assist those vacant storefronts that they have and give the residential in this new development?
Certainly have not considered it. I'm here with the one of the representatives of the owner today, but we'll certainly take that under advisement, and I'm sure we can open up discussions with staff.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. Maybe hear a little bit more from you before it comes back to council. I know I am definitely putting you on the spot here, and it's not typical practice, but I think that your application as it is does have merit to keep it, to ask for that exemption and have the residential in it. But if we could maybe work to support those local stores that are already there and existing vacancies in the central business district, that might be a great partnership. Thanks.
Thank you. We will do that.
Any other questions from committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Phillips. And we will move on. We do have two speakers registered. Deborah Rayner and Alan Gardner. You'd like to speak to the report? And I'll remind you that of our 5-minute time limit.
Through the chair, thank you for hearing our concerns. The biggest concern was one of our biggest concerns was the storm drainage, because in heavy rainfalls over the years, I've lived here since 1978. Storm sewers in the area do not adequately drain away the stormwater. I'm hoping that the engineering department will address that, as well as some of the other infrastructure issues on the street. A big concern for us really is the CBD zoning. There is not any commercial on this short street. I know it's close to schools, it's close to downtown. The proposed building will, will back up to the only grocery store in town. It's a residential street, and there's a lot of truck traffic going up and down the street going into the delivery for the said grocery store. It's a narrow street, so traffic is going to be an issue. I appreciate the fact that they've got 16 parking spots allocated for 18 units. My parking, I know that in the existing zoning, you don't need to provide any parking, but that's just going to make just a real congestion nightmare here. I would have preferred to see, and I know it's not my business to tell you what to do, but a couple of residential, single family dwellings would have been perfect for this street, not an 18-unit, 3-story building. But again, everybody's screaming for affordable housing. I understand. Did you hear that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Gardner. Deborah, would you like to add any comments?
Sorry, you'll have to forgive me. I'm not well, so my voice is a little off. Yeah, basically, we just wanted to reiterate some of our concerns that were in our letters of April 26th and April 28th. We appreciate the fact we did review the public hearing report, which was sent to us after we submitted the first letter. So we were made aware that you were aware of the issues with regard to the water drainage, etc. So we do appreciate that that is going to be looked at, because that has been one of our biggest concerns is, how the street cannot adequately provide for what's here now. How is it going to provide for an 18-unit apartment building? So thank you for that. As well, we're concerned about the overflow of parking to the curbside. So those were pretty much a lot, our main concerns with regard to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the deputation? Councilor Columbus?
No, I had one for the planners.
No more questions. Thank you very much, Deborah and Alan. We need a motion to receive that deputation information. No, we don't. Okay. Councilor Columbus, you had a question for the planners yet?
I had one, but I forgot what it was, Mr. Chair. So anyway, there was another one I had. There's a large walnut tree that's real mess every year, and it produces walnuts like you wouldn't believe. Makes a mess of the road. And I just wonder whether that walnut tree will be removed or whether it will impact development of this site. Perhaps Mr. Cahoon can answer, or Bob can answer that.
Mr. Phillip, do you have any answer about the walnut tree?
Yes, I believe the walnut tree is in jeopardy with their proposed driveway, so it will be removed. But as part of this, new landscaping will be introduced as part of the development and through the site plan approval process. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And I think this is the right move to eliminate that commercial, because like it was said, it is a residential street. And I think it will relieve a lot of the parking issue, because with commercial, traffic will be much more intense there going in and out. I think just straight residential is the right way to go with this site.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Seeing none, would someone like to move the staff recommendation or propose an alternative? Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Taylor. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Next item 4.4 is CD-22-044 OP NPL 2022-047 and ZNPL 2022-048. An application has been received to create 3 new residential lots by amending the official plan to allow the retained lands to be serviced without a lot frontage and to change the zoning of the proposed separate lots from institutional to hamlet residential. Henrik Scholten, on behalf of the Roman Catholic Episcopal Corporation of the Diocese of London in Ontario and Agent Civic Planning Solutions, Inc., has put forth the application affecting the land described as concession STR, Part Lot 162, Plan 37R 10738, Part 8 in Cortland. And we have Mohammed Alam to present the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through Mr. Chair to the council, this is a 4.17 acres of land known as Cortland Cemetery, located at the south side within Cortland urban boundary. There is an existing access to the cemetery from Tablet Street through a registered easement on the adjacent property. The western portion of the land is vacant at this moment along St. Ladislaus Street and have no access from that street at this moment. The subject lands are surrounded by low density residential development to the west and south, institutional to the north. There is a church and an elementary school at their side. and mostly agricultural to the east side. The current official plan designation is urban residential and zoned as institutional. The proposal is to create 3 residential lots at the unused portion of the subject lands by severing the land from the portion of the existing cemetery use. The proposed residential lots will have municipal water connection and private septic system. To facilitate this development, an official plan amendment will be required to allow the retained land, which is the existing cemetery, to be functional with the existing easement for an access. A zoning bylaw amendment will be required to change the vacant portion of the subject lands from institutional to residential hamlet to facilitate 3 residential units, residential lots. These lands will be eventually be severed from the existing cemetery. To Mr. Chair, in support of this development, we received a planning justification report, a hydrogeological assessment, which is recently been updated, and we got some additional information, a functional servicing report, and a certificate of closing for the portion of cemetery, which is proposed for these residential lots. The certificate is provided by Ministry of Government and Consumer Branch to ensure the cemetery closure is compliant with the Funeral, Burial, and Cremation Services Act 2022. 2002. The review of the ministry assessed the proposal to ensure that the site is free from archaeological and heritage features. There is no intermains or scatterings in that part, and maintain public safety and integrity of the remaining cemetery. The application has been circulated for technical comments. No major concerns has been flagged. The hydrogeological assessment has been updated, and staff is reviewing that. Staff will provide further comments during the recommendation report on this. So, Mr. Chair, no public input has been received for this application. Staff will provide a recommendation report for a future council meeting in an expedite manner. That's all from me for this application. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. Any questions from committee? Councillor Vandenbreech.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Mohammed. This is in a residential area already. This is in a lovely subdivision. We're just looking at adding three lots in that particular subdivision. Am I correct in saying that?
So, Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct.
Right. So it's a benefit to that area and adding three new single dwelling homes, I would assume. It has potential for three single dwelling homes. Am I correct?
So, Mr. Chair, yes, the proposed development proposal is for 3 single detached dwelling lots.
Okay, thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mohammed. We do have the applicant's agent on the line. Mr. Rowe, do you have a presentation or just to answer questions?
I'm here to, I guess, answer any questions. We had quite an extensive a set of meetings and correspondence with the ministry to get the partial closing of the cemetery. We were able to do that, and they had no issues with that. The proposal is to create 3 residential lots, which will be consistent with what's in the existing subdivision. One of the, I guess, points that when reading the staff report, they talk about an archaeological report. When dealing with the ministry, were able to get the clearance without a full archaeological report, in that they were satisfied with the records kept by St. Ladislas Cemetery Board regarding interments. That cemetery actually opened in the 1950s, so it doesn't have a long history, and actually some members of the board were present when the cemetery was opened. So what we would ask is that we not have to do a archaeological report on the vacant part of the cemetery, and looking for archaeological remains and things like that. The site is well removed from any water courses or that type of thing. And it's within a developed subdivision, so we don't see what the merit would be for a further archaeological report if required by staff. We've done our due diligence and did submit the hydrogeological reports, functional servicing, and my justification report, and the details of the amendment to the permit for the existing cemetery granted by the province. So I think we've done quite a bit. It's been almost a year since we started on this endeavor, and we'll be looking forward to getting on with getting things finalized. If there's any questions, by all means.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rowe. Any questions for the applicant's agent? Seeing none, thanks everyone. There's no more questions, and we have no more members of the public on the line. Does anyone wish to move the staff recommendation or propose an alternative? Moved by Councillor Vanendriessche, seconded by Councillor Huffman. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, thank you, everyone. The next item is CD 22-043 OPNPL 2022-043 and ZNPL 2022-053.
Hendrick.
An application has been received to amend the official
Is now
plan
exiting.
designation from commercial to urban residential and change the zoning from service commercial with a holding to urban residential type 4 to permit 40 back-to-back townhouse units. Premuk Development Limited, on behalf of 2705973 Ontario Inc. and agent G. Douglas Valley, have put forth the application affecting the lands described as Plan 37M57, Block 60, Old Highway 24, Waterford. And Mohammed, will you be presenting this report as well? I think you're still muted, Mr. Mohammed.
My apology. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, through you to the council, this is a 0.7 hectare of land proposal located at the north side of Land Boulevard and east side of Highway 24 Old. The property is a vacant parcel, relatively flat, surrounded by low density residential development, which is known as in subdivision to the east. Commercial uses to the north and protected industrial site, industrial zone to the west side. Immediate to the east side of the subject land, there is a townhouse condominium development also. The subject lands are designated commercial in the official plan and zoned as service commercial in the zoning bylaw. The proposal is for 40-unit block back-to-back townhouse development, which will be serviced by a 7.3 meter private laneway and with on-site residential and visitor parking spaces. This will require the change of the official plan designation from commercial to residential and change of zoning from service commercial to the urban residential type 4 zone. A special provision is requested through the zoning bylaw amendment This will include a definition of back-to-back townhouse development as a permitted use, as it is not defined in the current zoning bylaw. Relief of minimum frontier from 6 meter to 4 meter. Relief of maximum building height from 11 meter to 13.5 meter. This slide provides some illustration where it shows how a back-to-back townhouse look like. Generally, this type of townhouse units share the side and rear walls with other units. The objective is mostly to achieve higher density and cost-effective models. In this case, the proposed density is 57 units per hectare. Through Mr. Chair to the Council, we received various reports and supporting documents in support of this development. Among them, we reviewed a planning justification report prepared by G. Douglas Valley Limited, a traffic impact study with collected traffic data on 14th of September 2021. And we also received some updated information from April. And the agent also provided information that some further data collection will happen in May 2022. We have also received a functional servicing report, a D6 compatibility and noise assessment. The D6 analysis identified that the nearest industrial facility is Norfolk Disposal, a waste transport station located 250 meters northwest of the proposed development. This class 2 medium industrial operation is not considered to adversely impact the proposed development for noise, odor, or dust, since it is located outside the potential recommended separation distance through the ministry guidelines, which is 70 meters, and located more than 2/3 distance of the potential future potential influence area, which is 300 meters for a medium industry facility. There are some few other uses nearby. One of them is water for truck and trailer, a commercial truck repair shop, which is located 100 meters away from the subject lands. There is another commercial retail Pickard Peanuts and food packaging operation, which is located at approximately 155 meters northwest. The proposed development is located beyond the recommended 20 meter separation distance and 70 meter influence zone from these facilities. And the D6 analysis that the agent provided recommends that there will be no adverse impact from these developments, but given that the development will be near to Old Highway 24, road traffic that will contribute some kind of sound level, which is higher than noise generated from other industrial operations. And therefore, the recommendation was given for air conditioning for all recommended townhouse units along Highway 24, and warning clause for potential noise in the purchase and sale agreements for future owners. Staff will further review this report and provide comments in the recommendation report. Through Mr. Chair, we received most of the technical comments for this development. Water and sanitary modeling has been completed, and we just received a report on this, which indicates that there may not be adequate fire flow in this area, and this will be needed to be addressed by the applicant. Water allocation will not be provided during the official plan and zoning bylaw applications. Through Mr. Chair, we received a significant number of public input on this development. The community has been actively participating in planning application process. There has been active communication between planning staff, the committee members, and the applicant. The main concerns from the community includes stormwater management concerns within and outside of the property, impact of existing wildlife once the existing land will be developed, higher density and its impact, architectural quality, building materials, location compared to the existing neighborhood, reduction of commercial use and potential loss of employment, potential increase of traffic, lack of parking facilities on public street, and concerns around adequate buffer. It is my understanding that the applicant and the committee members are actively working on some of those issues, but I leave this for them to address. So the next step is we'll request the applicant to provide detailed response on how the identified issues are addressed with any updated reports and drawings. Staff will further review the documents and will put forward the recommendation report in the coming months. And that's everything for this application. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. Any questions for staff from the committee? Councillor Huffman.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Mohammed. Could you just expand a little bit on what you were saying about water flow? What was the concern there?
So as part of the, to Mr. Chair, as part of the development application review process, the engineering development sent the functional servicing data for water modeling and sanitary modeling. And through that analysis and report, it was found that in that area there is a low pressure for fire flow. I think our colleague from development engineers is also here attending the meeting, so they might provide some further details, but this is what I received. And when you have low fire flow, that might need some specific standards to be maintained to so that the development can happen within that low fire flow. But I'll pass it to our colleague for engineering who can further explain that.
Okay, thank you very much. Great. Tim, are you able to expand on that?
Sure. Through you to through the chair to you. Part of our site plan review and our zoning reviews, we asked for the functional servicing report to include a fire flow calculation, which is based on the fire underwriter survey. And that determines the amount of water that would be required to fight a fire. And that would indicate the amount of water pressure and flow that needs to be coming out of the hydrant nearest to the development. So part of that calculation would give us the max day flow and the required flow for the firefighting. And what we have determined is that there wouldn't be enough water delivered to the site to fight a fire for a development that is this dense with the number of units and the type of construction that they have suggested so far. There is an opportunity for them to relook at the number of units or how the units will be constructed to reduce the amount of fire flows that would be required to be delivered by our system. If they cannot revisit their design, do not change the way the buildings are constructed, then we'd have to look at them providing upgrades to the existing water mains to be able to deliver the fire flow that is required for their development.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. I guess my next question to you would, Tim, do you have a number in mind in terms of the number of units that the water flow is capable of handling in terms of a fire emergency? Is there a recommendation to the builder as to what number you're recommending?
No, I don't have a number, and it would require the developer to look at the number of to look how the buildings were going to be constructed. There's different, it's a formula and many different variables goes into that formula, so they would have to look at it. We can provide the flows that are available to that site, and they could design around that. We have that with other developments in the area.
Okay, thank you very much. My next question, if I may, my next question is to you, Mohammed. In regards to the commercial space available in Waterford, I know that this was asked in one of the previous presentations, and it wasn't necessarily something that staff had handy. Are you aware of what commercial space is still available in the Waterford urban area or downtown area? You're on mute.
You're unmuted, Ian.
Sorry for that again. Through Mr. Chair, to Councillor Hoffman, I don't have any number at this moment about how many land is available, but based on the recent development proposals we're receiving, we have observed that in a significant number of commercial developments are requested to be transformed into a mixed use or residential development. Mostly the commercial developments are along the highway or major transport routes, and those areas are, as this development also, are requested for new developments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mohammed, in your professional opinion as a planner, are you comfortable with changing this site from service commercial to R4 residential? And I ask that because in 2007, perhaps it was a different owner, the council of the day felt it was very important to have some commercial property available on Old Highway 24. It is a arterial road or a collector road, and we all know that Waterford is growing at a significant residential pace going forward, and really nothing has changed except there's been new councils, but I think it's important to retain that commercial block there. And I'm pretty certain that the applicant that's dealing with this currently today, that he must have been aware that what the zoning was on that property before he purchased that property. Can you comment on that? I'm just really concerned about taking away too much commercial property off a community that's really growing quickly and doesn't have much down in the downtown area.
So, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Columbus, yes, we looked at that perspective also. Generally, when we receive an application or a proposal, we try to see that from policy perspective first. The existing designation is commercial, and the official plan policy provides some directions how development should occur in the commercial designated area. It's not that a residential development cannot happen, but there are certain limits that provided in the policy, which includes a residential development in a commercial area which retain the character of the commercial flavor. At the same time, in a residential land in a commercial development which retain the residential character of the development. And mostly in a commercial development, the policy also allows residential development where the ground floor or the lower stage podiums are still retail or commercial development. During the pre-consultation meeting, we provided these policies and recommended that a mixed-use development might be more appropriate for this kind of areas where there is an existing commercial designation. But we did not provide any recommendation yet. This is just an information report, so staff will review all these policies again during the recommendation.
Thank you. We'll look forward to your recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Vandenbee.
Yes, no, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Mohammed then. At the end of the day, you're talking about a property that's leaning towards 24, but backing it behind it has a lot of significant residential area behind it. So residential isn't out of the question, but how many square feet of this kind of project would you think would have to be maintained as the commercial downstairs? Like, how many square feet of these buildings would be?
So, Mr. Chair, so the policy requires that the ground floor will be commercial and the upper floors can be residential. And that actually triggers for a mixed-use development. So as long as the ground floor is commercial and the overall character stays commercial in a commercial building, then the policy is met. But in this case, it is a little bit unique, I would say, because there is no development on the property. So the policy basically addresses the building where any development happens. But if the development is vacant, then we have to see other policies also, like intensification, infill developments that is provided in the official plan.
But when I look at these drawings and the pictures of these proposed development, what you're telling me is the back can be still residential and the frontage, so that splits the building in half, so that the bottom would be commercial, potential commercial units.
I think the whole building is strictly residential. They're changing the entire zoning, getting rid of the commercial zoning and going to an R4 residential on everything.
You know, and I appreciate that, but if we were to insist upon some, what would be, you would think is, because I can see the size of the drawing, but I can't read it because of the print.
So, Mr. Chair, so the current proposal, as you mentioned, that the current proposal is a full residential development, a condominium development where there is no component of commercial. Initially, staff recommended that there should have at least some sort of mixed-use development, which permits some sort of commercial activity at the front along Highway 24.
Absolutely, I totally get that. And because we're looking at a 0.7 of an acre, not big. So when we're condensing this to going up, we're going 3 floors. The frontage, the square footage isn't that much on it. I'm a person that seems to think that this commercial should be maintained, especially on Highway 24. So I will look forward to more input. Thank you.
Any other questions from committee? I think I'll take a little bit of liberty and make the comment that, you know, I think there's a reason that it's industrial on one side of the road. Then we go down to commercial and then it becomes residential. It's sort of that staging down to gradually get to the residential. And I'd look at it this way, if there were houses there right now and somebody applied to put a factory up across the street, how much logic would there be in that? And I wonder whether the reverse should be true as well, that you can't have industrial directly to a very dense residential unit. It just doesn't make sense to me, but I should be quiet when I'm sitting here in the chair. If there's no more questions for staff, thank you very much, Mohammed. And we do have a bunch of deputations coming up. So we have the applicant and the agent ready to speak upon this report. So we have Darpan Patel. Will you be speaking to the report?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's Eldon Darbison speaking. I'll be making the presentation today.
Okay, and if Mr. Valley's not with you, I probably don't have to remind you that you have 5 minutes. So.
Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. My name's Eldon Darbison. I'm a registered professional planner with G. Douglas Valley Limited. Our clients and the developers are Permit Developments Limited. Slide 3, please. Just one back. There you go. So yes, this is a 40-unit residential development that adds to the variety of residential lands on the periphery of the neighborhood. It's proposing one access onto Old Highway 24. There's large landscaped areas, and we will install more mature trees in strategic areas with the assistance of a landscape architect through the site plan process. Slide 4, please. The development will become a gateway feature to the south end of Waterford and the Yin subdivision, with emphasis on landscaping and sidewalk connections to the public realm. It's been designed to avoid proposing parking along Lamb Boulevard and Old Highway 24, whereby the front door sidewalks lead to the pedestrian sidewalk. Slide 5, please. So this slide demonstrates how the current zoning permits an 11-meter high commercial building, 9 meters from the rear property line, close to the Eden Hill condos. You can see on this slide that you have both developments, and there's an orange hatch, and that hatch, as you can see, represents a potential commercial building that could be built on that site today. There are other potential greater impacts on the adjacent residential lands based on current permitted uses of the service commercial zone. We are proposing residential development with increased setbacks, a step back rooftop amenity area, and landscaping along the rear property line to help improve compatibility with the Eden Hill condos. Slide 6, please. This slide demonstrates a perspective view from the balconies of the Eden Hill condos. The landscaping is transparent here to try and capture the distance the proposed development will be from these balconies. Slide 7, please. This is a perspective from the last unit positioned closest to Lamb Boulevard, so you can get an appreciation for how far set back they are and how they look visually. Slide 8, please. So what's permitted now? So the shopping center commercial zone exists on the lands today. Some of the less compatible uses of this include things like a lumber yard, restaurant, bar or nightclub, gas station, automobile service and repair station. These are uses that require intense parking and may require outdoor storage. They have less landscaping, they increase traffic, they require multiple accesses. So at the moment, these kinds of uses can proceed without any public input through the site plan process, because that's what's in place through zoning at the moment. Next slide, please. So traffic is a significant concern, as brought up by the neighborhood. Projections have been made to the year 2040, which confirm that the development in this area do not even come close to creating a need for road improvements. The consultant recognized that the traffic counts were conducted during COVID, and we understand that this is a concern. As such, we're going to initiate a recount of the area's traffic conditions prior to a council decision, just to verify that the data and the conclusions of the traffic impact study are correct. Next slide, please. Thank you. So yes, we've all been working together. We've met with the Yin Subdivision Action Committee and the neighborhood on multiple occasions to discuss a number of concerns. We've probably spent close to 12 hours of meeting time, not including communications and community concern letters and applicant response letters. Most recently, we had a well-attended neighborhood meeting to present the development, and we listened to concerns and answered questions. There were concerns with the types of materials such as cladding mixed with the amount of brick and stone facades that we've all discussed. There were concerns for buffering, landscaping, condominium ownership, snow storage, etc. We've made modifications to accommodate the comments and concerns of the Action Committee. The developers in concert with the proposed development on the south side of Lamb Boulevard have agreed to extend the sidewalk of Old Highway 24 towards the Esso station to ensure safety and pedestrian connectivity exists. At the end of the day, the results of the discussions with the neighborhood have been overall positive and supportive. Next slide, please. So this has been a brief presentation for a very substantial development. Since we only have a short period of time to speak, we would encourage council to ask questions. Both John Valley and I are available. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Darberson. Any questions for the applicant's agent? Councillor Huff.
Thank you, Chair Van Passen, through you to Eldon. During your discussions with the community, was there any discussion regarding the exterior of these buildings? Any discussion?
But yes, we had some great discussions with the community group. It was felt that the original plan needed to be softened a bit, and that different exterior materials had to be considered, such as stone and brick. There's no vinyl proposed here. This is a nice forms of cladding, and we've brought back a concept you actually saw on slide 4 today, which was much better received by the community.
Okay, thank you. And my next question to you is the current owner of this property. Obviously, it's zoned commercial. Did they, and they knew it was zoned commercial when they purchased it, have they made any attempts to get commercial businesses in this location? Or have they just jumped right to looking at a rezone?
That's a great question. Mr. Valley might be able to help me out a little bit here. It definitely has been consideration for commercial development of various types of and uses. Considering everything from a planning perspective, it was felt that residential would be a more compatible form of development with the neighborhood and generate far less traffic. And though that's what part of the reason why we're here today. And John has his hand up to add to that.
Thank you, Eldon. Members of council, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through the chair to Councillor Huffman, absolutely. When we were first retained, actually, the project was designated as a commercial development. That was the task. We were looking at the time at a gas station, car wash. There was idea for medical clinic and perhaps some forms of residential. We were looking at fast food drive-through, this kind of thing. Our client has significant contacts in that commercial development arena throughout the province of Ontario, and he put out a request for expressions of interest for commercial development on this site. And he's done this before in other communities, and unfortunately he got absolutely zero response, zero interest in commercial development at this location in Waterford. That wasn't really a surprise. After all, this block has been on the market for sale for commercial development for 11 years and has not been able to sell that, which indicates the level of market activity for commercial in this area of Waterford. So to answer your question, yes, commercial was investigated extensively and simply no demand in the market.
Okay, thank you for that. And I just have one more question. And my next question is in regards to the discussion that we had from staff and the water flow. Have there been any discussions with your client in regards to relooking at the build in order to meet the criteria for the water flow?
Yes, I can answer that one as well through the chair. Our team has looked at that, and we have two alternatives, either one of which would satisfy the water flow requirement. One would be moving to a non-combustible construction within the buildings, which would dramatically reduce the fire flow required to service them. The other one is to compartmentalize them through the use of firewalls in accordance with the Ontario Building Code. So we're not concerned about that limit of water that's available on the site, because we know we can adjust our design to accommodate the limits that the capacity can be provided by the municipal system.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions for the agents? Seeing none, well, thank you very much, Mr. Valley and Mr. Darvison, and we will move on. We do have a few deputations booked here. The first one that I have on my sheet is Stephen Bedford on behalf of the Inn Subdivision Action Committee.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Public Hearing Committee. I'm assuming you can hear me fine?
Yes, go ahead, and I'll remind you, you got 5 minutes to make your presentation.
And I'll try to limit my comments to 5 minutes. My name is Stephen Bedford. I'm the principal planner for Landex Developments and have been providing planning advice to the Yin Neighborhood Committee with respect to both this development and the proposal on the southeast corner of Lamb and Old Highway 24 since early April. We have had several meetings when we discuss both the policy implications as well as the urban design details. The committee did engage a senior urban designer, Daniel Romanenko, from the firm Better Neighborhoods based in St. Catharines to provide urban design advice to them as well. The neighborhood committee understood its role to be with the neighborhood to research the current OP and zoning, assess the application's impact on the community, meet with the planning staff, understand the process, and communicate to staff the community concerns. They met with the developers and have had ongoing communications with residents, including facilitating a community meeting with the developers last Friday, and to provide a presentation this afternoon. The committee did indicate to me that they would have appreciated the opportunity to understand the development proposal well before the scheduled public meeting. Even though notices of the application were received in early February, an option that the community would have preferred was a formal public information meeting sponsored by the county or even the proponents shortly after the application was submitted. If that had occurred, the neighbors, proponents, and staff could have met and initiated conversations well before the statutory public meeting. In my experience, these public information meetings are helpful for all parties. Proponent and staff understand the concerns of the neighbors early in the process and can respond well before the statutory public meeting. While Dan and I had several meetings with the committee and offered advice, we did not participate in any of the meetings the neighborhood committee had with the proponents of these developments, nor the community meeting that was held with the proponents last Friday. The neighborhood committee was very appreciative of the willingness of the proponents to meet and some of the changes to the design that have been proposed by the owners. Even so, as a result of the community meeting last Friday, the committee would like the county to consider all the concerns that have not yet been resolved. I'm here to present the position of the committee and the feedback from Friday's community meeting. In our initial meeting with the committee, I did point out that there was no market information in the planning justification reports to support the proposed changes of the OP designation from commercial to residential, other than to say the land was vacant. I did point out that these commercial lands are there to provide commercial services to the community as it continues to grow. The committee, after hearing the feedback on the residential design, and after discussions with the proponents, felt they would prefer a residential neighborhood as an entrance to the neighborhood and as a land use adjacent to their neighborhood. The community and committee concerns include density. The owner has agreed to include the number of units, 40, in the zoning bylaw. Even so, after the meeting on Friday, it became clear that the community feels the density is too high. In the absence of policy direction in the OP with respect to the location of high-density developments, the committee and community recommends the density be reduced. Height. The committee, during its initial review, thought 3 stories might be appropriate. After the community meeting, it became clear the community feels 2 stories is a more appropriate height. However, in reviewing the plans, it looks like there is a covered area on the roof outdoor amenity area. It is suggested that staff reflect further on this plan, as this covered area may constitute a 4th floor in the zoning bylaw. This development backs directly onto the existing 2-story Eden Hill townhouse condominiums. Between the 3-story height and the grading difference of the 2 adjacent properties, the proposed developments will loom over the backyards of the adjacent townhouses, reducing their privacy significantly. The community is concerned that the fence and trees proposed by the developer will not be sufficient to provide the visual buffer necessary to block this overlook. Exterior finish. The owner has agreed that the exterior materials on the proposed buildings will be consistent with the high quality of the building materials of the homes in the subdivision: brick, stone, and high-quality composite materials. It is understood that this requirement will be embedded in any approval documents.
Did you move to the summary part of this? Because you got a minute.
Yeah, I've just got a couple of more words here. Traffic at the corner of Lamb and Old 24. The committee continues to be concerned with the future potential traffic issues at the corner. There is going to be much more traffic in the future with all the new development coming to Waterford and the county. The committee appreciates the additional information Paradigm has submitted, but the committee thought it would have given them more confidence in Paradigm's work if they had been able to reference a county transportation plan and how the proposal impacted the plan, if at all. They would like to be assured by the county that the county will deal with the questions of need for future traffic lights or turning lanes. Sidewalks are an important community amenity. The committee is pleased the owner, along with the owner across Lamb Boulevard, have agreed to share the cost of extending the sidewalk north to connect with the existing sidewalk in Old Highway 24. Sidewalks also must be provided along Lamb. Buffers. The committee was pleased to see the front doors of the units fronting onto Lamb and Old Highway 24. This treatment along the frontage creates a residential environment that is appropriate to the entrance of Waterford and the Yin subdivision. With respect to servicing capacity, the owner has agreed to provide sufficient information to illustrate there will be sufficient capacity available to serve Waterford in the future, and that the stormwater management plan will ensure there's no negative impact on the Eden Hill condominiums. I also mentioned to the committee that in the absence of the site plan application being part of this application, any critical design issues, density, number of units, building setback, locations, building height, width of buffer, number of parking spaces, fencing, and landscaping details need to be embedded in the zoning bylaw to ensure they are implemented. How will the building materials be confirmed? In other municipalities where I've represented clients, councils have required the site plan agreement to be processed at the same time as the zoning bylaw amendment, as the design issues were often the critical elements deciding on whether a development is compatible with the neighborhood and eventually approved. The site plan agreement can add confidence to council and community that the concept that council based its approval on, in fact, gets built. The committee continues to be thankful to the proponent.
We'll see if there's any questions from the committee. Any questions from members of the committee for Mr. Bedford? Councillor Huffman.
Thank you, Chair Van Passen, through you to Mr. Bedford. Is there anything else that you would like to discuss?
I would just like to say that the committee continues to be thankful that the proponent has been working with them, and they're hoping that they'll be able to come to further agreement between now and when the staff make a recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Bedford. We will move on to the next deputation on my list is Wendy Franco.
Thank you, Chair and member council attendees. I live at 6 Winterberry Lane, which backs directly onto this property. And I'm very thankful that the builder has met with the committee. I wish I had been a little bit more involved up front. But that being said, I'm here today to share my thoughts on our proposed development. Let me just bring my notes in here. So I do understand the need for more housing, but I also think that Highway 24 is a main corridor running through our town/city, and I think it's important to have a central core. I realize that as it stands now, we have no say on any kind of commercial development on that corridor. it's already kind of written in blood. But if we were to proceed with the existing proposal, there are a number of concerns that I have. And first off, there's probably about 1.5 times more units proposed in this space as opposed to where Eden Hill Developments resides on. So I personally moved away from the city to get away from the increased density. And I don't think I'd be out of line saying that the majority of us who bought into this subdivision or Eden Hill, we bought these bungalow units hoping, you know, to remain here until we die, or at least not physically able to stay. I think there's Southwestern Ontario is a big province and we have lots of room to grow. So I don't think there's a need to be putting in this many units. Now, with regards to the actual structure of the buildings, the height of the building, even with the setback, really doesn't allow for privacy because there's no really backyard to these units. And the main population of Winterberry Lane, we're empty nesters like myself. And especially as we age, we probably are going to be using our balconies as our outdoor space. And right now with the proposed development, based on where I reside, and those pictures are very indicative of what I would see, the side of the building, I don't have much of an issue with because there's nobody there to infringe on my privacy. But the other building has all the parking spaces facing us, and aesthetically it's not something I really want to look at. The other issue is there is no outdoor space for young families to have children play. With the existing plan, they may end up on the green space next to our fence line or on the front lawns, and I just don't think there's enough space there for a young family to move into, especially if they have children. Now, also, as far as being the rezoning, if it was to go through to approval, I'd like to see one less building on the north side and have the two remaining buildings on the north side rotated so that their parking spaces face those to the south. And that way, hopefully we could still honor the setback and just be looking at 2 less units, maybe to give us a little bit more setback, and the people at Winterberry Lane would only see the side of the building versus everyone's back balconies and parking spaces. I think it would give much nicer curb appeal as well. Now with the additional units, of course, traffic is also a concern in the area. I think that's been stipulated time and time again. And then I know the water issues are being looked at. So I've been very happy that the development organization and the builder has been trying to work with us. So, you know, with all this influx of more families, we've got schools that are bursting at the seams. And I'm glad to say that, you know, if they do put in these units, that I'm glad to see they've changed the materials, because the subdivision is very upscale. The bungalow I purchased is very upscale. And quite honestly, I don't want my property value being compromised as a result of that. So I'm hoping that, you know, the builders will continue to work with our committee here and are still willing to make some concessions. I do like the design personally, but you know, I'm concerned with the height and just the density of the actual subdivision itself. And I think that's pretty much encapsulates everything I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much, Wendy. Do we have any questions for the deputation? Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Wendy. So in summary here, would you rather see this R4 as proposed, or would you rather see the commercial use, a service station, a drive-through restaurant, or a lumberyard?
That's a very good question. I would rather see residential if those were my only choices, but are those our only choices?
Thank you.
Any other questions for the deputation? Councillor Huffman?
Thank you, Chair Van Passen. I don't necessarily have a question. I just wanted to clarify for people that that the consultation with the Board of Education happens through our planning department. And with previous developments, we receive no feedback typically from the Board of Education. So I would encourage people to contact their school board trustees when they're looking at getting feedback in terms of development. That's who you need to pursue this with, because we don't receive anything necessarily from the board. Thanks.
Councillor Van Andries, did you have a question or? No, seeing none, then thank you very much, Wendy, and we'll move on to our next speaker, Mr. Jack Harvey, who I see on my screen has been waiting patiently forever.
Thank you, Chair and Council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm sorry?
Just remind you, 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jack Harvey. I live here with my wife, Raka, of 45 years. We have been escaping urban sprawl all those years. We lived in Hamilton, Dundas, Brantford, and most recently we decided to escape once again to the beautiful serenity of this farming community that I didn't even know existed until I drove out here to take a look at this complex. The things that we were looking for mostly, we wanted a bungalow, we wanted a low rise, we didn't want a high rise, we didn't want high density, we wanted a double garage, we wanted a walkout, we wanted a covered deck. And this condo in Eden Hills provided all of those things. We have a fabulous view of the west and the sunset and the farm fields and the greenery. And we're not naive enough to think that there wasn't going to be some kind of development behind where we are. We knew it was commercial, but we were led to believe it likely would be one story, consistent with the diesel and repair shop across the road, the insurance company, Foodland, and the likes of that sort of thing. So we were willing to roll the dice and say, okay, I think we can live with that. And then along comes, guess what? Urban sprawl. Now we have a developer that not only wants to build condominiums, which, don't get me wrong, I understand the need for additional housing due to aggressive immigration policies at the federal level, the provincial level, and pushed on down into the municipal level in any little community where there's a patch of dirt they can build something on. But they're not satisfied just to build beautiful condominiums like what we have here at Eden Hills. I would hope that that's what they would try to mirror, but they want to build high rise. Now, I'm going to go to the page 87 of the Norfolk County bylaws, where it says currently zoned this area, CS commercial or R3, maximum height 11 meters or 36 feet. The proposed amendment change is to R4, maximum height 13 meters, which is 47.5, 48 feet. These buildings will literally tower over us. It will shade us completely. We will not see a sunset. We will not enjoy the greenery and the serenity that we have so far. I'd rather bring them down to what we currently live in, if they could do that. But I do believe that this, when you price buildings, it's priced in square feet. So the more layers you have, the more square feet you have, the more profit margin you have. So I don't think his intention is just to provide homes for people that need them. A one-story plan with a finished basement is more than adequate for most families. So why be greedy and crowd it out? The past speaker made a tremendous suggestion of reversing a couple of buildings, putting the parking on the Highway 24 side and removing one building altogether. Now, to bring the height down, because 48 feet would tower over us, the sight line from the windows in their buildings looks directly down into our decks and the main space in our house, which are our living rooms, our family rooms, our master bedrooms. And this developer was kind enough to build huge windows in all of those spaces, which encompasses about 80% of the wall space. So naturally, it is a security issue. It's a privacy issue. You'd have to live in darkness with your blinds closed all day long. So for that reason, if I must accept a commercial development, then let's make it a whole heck of a lot lower and a lot fewer spaces, because even bringing it down doesn't diminish the number of dwellings available unless we take out the one building, which I thought was a fabulous idea because the parking is going to be right up against my backyard. So for that reason, I appreciate your time. I hope you give it consideration, and the last speaker's suggestions were amazing. If I had my druthers, I think I'd rather stick with commercial, but if it must be residential, then let's make it more appealing. And let's make it fit the rest of the neighborhood, the rest of the community. Otherwise, we're going to look like we're going down the 407. We're going to see skyscrapers and bridge cranes till death do us part. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Harvey. Are there any questions for the deputation? Seeing none, we thank you very much, sir, and we will go on to our next speaker. Rick Fijo, you can correct me on the pronunciation of your last name, and I apologize.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair and Committee. It's Rick Fijo, and I live at 12 Winterberry, and my property backs onto the proposed development. I got a few issues. First, number one will be the height density of the townhouse or the condo unit that's going to be proposed directly behind me. We have that general small town appeal here in Waterford, culture of Waterford as a whole, and the proposed buildings do not blend in well with that current atmosphere that we have here at Eden Hills and the surrounding Yins survey and subdivision. By putting something like that in would be a considerable eyesore, I think, in my mind. It would block my view, and it would only block views of everybody coming into this current survey the way it is. I've lived here my whole life. I've lived here for over 50 years in Waterford. I consider it my home. And massive developments like this, it's just not going to blend in well with the town itself. My next concern is traffic and pollution from a unit that, a 4-story unit like that, that's going to be developed. The traffic flow on Lamb onto Highway 24 will increase massively. We'll have nothing but traffic pollution. On top of the pollution will be, my concern is the high-rise condo units that are known to give lots of pollution. So that's one of my main concerns is where's that pollution going to go? Where's it going to go? It's going to go right into our backyards. I'm going to be on my deck inhaling that pollution from a high-rise unit as such. Also, my concern is with garbage and garbage bins that are going to be stored in behind these units that will, collect animals and rodents and odors from those bins. That's just a big concern. I don't know what the solution is with regards to the developer on that topic. Also, it's going to be water control and runoff. There has been discussions amongst other guest speakers here today about the water drainage from this condo unit that's or it's going to drain onto the Eden Hills property, which could cause flooding to our walkouts that are apparently they're not able to withstand the pressures of that water overflow from a unit as such that would be put into that space. Also, it's going to be water purity is my concern as well. Where are they going to get the water resources from? I know that we were short of water issues here in Waterford. I believe it has been rectified, but now I'm hearing that they have to tap into resources in the Bloomsburg or possibly get water piped in from Haldimand County. If that's being an issue at this current stage, where are we going to be when they want to develop a high-rise unit as such directly behind us? Also, environmental issues, like there's a pond just south of here. I know there's development plan for that as well. That's another concern on if they're going to remove that pond and if it could impact on environmental issues. Also, it just with a building like that, it just my concern too is the weight of that building. It's going to be land erosion and sinkage. Are we going to have issues with that? Is that plot of land able to withstand the weight of a building as such? That's my concern as well. Is it going to affect our units here at Eden Hills? Is it going to crack our foundations? Is it going to cause sinking issues? Has any studies have been done in results to that as well? And that's it for me. I have nothing else.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick. Do we have any questions for the deputation from the committee? Seeing none, we generally go back to past practice, and since Mr. Valley is still here, give him one more chance to make some comments after he's heard the public comments. Mr. Valley, would you like to say anything yet?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, just I noticed a couple things that we'd like to respond to. So first off, it was great to hear Mr. Bedford acknowledge all the work that's been done between the Inn committee and our clients. There have been meetings at the old Waterford Town Hall with the committee. There's been meetings at my office. There's been public open houses. There's been all kinds of exchange and lots of compromise on the developer side, which at the end of the day resulted in the letter that we produced, and it's in your package dated April 27th, where we go through, I'm going to say roughly a dozen different items: architectural control, renderings, density, traffic, sidewalks, buffering, landscaping, servicing capacity, stormwater management, snow storage, parking, ownership, community engagement. All these things are set out in that letter of April 27th with our response to that Yin Development Committee. And it was on that basis that you've got the letter in front of you today from that committee, where they say that they do in fact support this development, that they see that it is a better alternative for a good quality residential development than a commercial development in their backyard. If you go up the street, not too far, to Foodland and to some of those commercial, existing commercial land uses that back onto the Inn subdivision, I walked up there the other day and you see transport trucks in the backyards, you see loading bays, you hear the beep, beep, beep of forklifts as they back up, you see abandoned trailers, you see all kinds of outdoor storage, you see something, quite frankly, that I think is not really that compatible with residential development. And that's why we believe that this kind of residential development is logically extends the Inn subdivision and is much more compatible with the development adjacent to it than what's permitted today in the commercial zone. It's interesting to note that the Inn subdivision group specifically said they support this residential development instead of commercial that it's zoned for today. And they're very aware that if a commercial developer did come along today, that it would be simply a matter of applying for a site plan approval and straight on to building. There would be no interaction or opportunity for the public to have any input whatsoever into that form of development. There'd be no public process because it's already zoned. We heard today, and we've heard before, this issue about being too close to the Eden Hill condos, and we respect that. And that's why the latest version of our plan shows that most of the buildings that we're talking about are 18 meters or 60 feet from the property line to the building. Now, there is a corner of one building that is closer than that, but the biggest building is 60-foot setback. That includes some parking area. That includes a 10-meter landscaping, or sorry, a 10-foot, a 3-meter landscaping strip, where, again, in our letter that we issued, and it's in your package, we've agreed to planting large caliper evergreen trees as a good solid buffer in that zone. So we think that, you know, we have accommodated the concern of this development being too close to Eden Hill because of that 60-foot massive setback. That's almost 3 times what's required by the zoning bylaw, and setting them back so far. We've then heard about the height. Okay, fair enough. This is a little bit higher than a standard residential zone. But we also look to say it's not that much different in height from a commercial building that is permitted today. And that differential is very small. We are still higher. But when you look at, we heard comments about sunsets, viewing sunsets, shadowing, all these kinds of things. You have to consider two things with shadowing, not just the height of the building, but the distance it is away. So we showed the public meeting on Friday, how because our building is set back 18 meters, because of that large separation distance, that the shadowing effect is actually less than a commercial building, which could be built on the site today. So we think that's really important. We've also looked at traffic. There's been a lot of discussion about traffic. People have said, we need left turn lanes, we need traffic signals, we need all these things. The developer should agree to put those in now. Well, we always go back to what our traffic consultants tell us, and there was concern as well that the traffic counts were done during the COVID period. So our traffic consultant acknowledges that traffic counts were done during COVID and that the counts would be lower than they would normally be. So they have been factored up to account for that. That still didn't seem to satisfy people. So we agreed to go out and redo the counts again this month before this comes back to council, redo those counts, confirm that what he projected and factored up as counts were actually accurate, and confirm that any increase that we did find made no change in the results of the traffic study. It's important to notice that most municipalities require a projection of traffic out 5 years, 10 years at the very most is typical. In this case, our report goes out to the year 2040. And even at 2040, we are not even close to any warrants for left turn lanes or traffic signals or any of those things. So we just really believe that traffic is simply not, yes, there will be more traffic. Anytime there's going to be more traffic. If we develop this as a commercial site, there'd be a lot more traffic. Imagine the traffic that gets generated by, say, a gas station, where cars are constantly coming in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. Much higher traffic volumes could be generated from a commercial development compared to a residential development. We also heard about stormwater management.
Minute to summarize, Mr. Valley.
Sure. I'm on my last point, actually. The stormwater management, we have agreed in writing to go to the condominium corporation and review all of our stormwater management designs, all of our grading designs with them at the site plan approval stage, to show them that we're not putting any water on them. Your staff won't let us do that anyway, so that we're not creating any drainage problems. And we've agreed to review all that with the condo corporation at the time of site plan approval. So in summary, we've worked really hard to get consensus with the citizens group, and we're really happy that they've issued a letter of support for us. And we hope that we can get the council support as well. Thank you.
And thank you. Any questions for Mr. Valley yet? Seeing none, then thank you everyone for your deputations and your input today. And we have no more on the list, Kevin. So then would anybody wish to move to staff recommendation or propose an alternative? Councillor Taylor moves, Councillor Rabbit seconds, all in favor? That is carried. Thanks, everyone. We've got one more application on the list. It is CD 22-040. It is OPNPL 2022-039 and ZNPL 2022-040. An application has been received to amend the official plan by redesignating a portion of the subject lands from commercial to urban residential. A zoning bylaw amendment application is also associated with this proposal to change the existing zoning of an R5H and CSH to an R4 zone to permit 55 residential units with a mix of housing types. Berlinda Homes, on behalf of Berlinda Homes and agent G. Douglas Valley Limited, have put forth the application affecting the land described as 750 Old Highway 24. And Mohammed, you are handling this one again?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, the council, this is a 1.3 hectare of lands located at the southern side of Waterfront Urban Boundary. and just at the south side of Lamb Boulevard, adjacent to Inn subdivision. The surrounding lands are low density residential at the east side, commercial at the north side, and protected industrial at the west side of the subject lands. The official plan designation of the site is partially urban residential and partially commercial. The zoning of the subject lands are also partially service commercial and partially residential. The residential part is zoned as R5, which allows 44 apartment dwelling units through a site-specific provision. The new proposal includes both commercial and residential portion of the land to be developed for a 55 condominium units in the form of various types of townhouse units. The variations include 36 stack townhouse between 1 to 3 stories, 19 block townhouses between 1 to 2 stories. 19 additional parking spaces are provided in addition to what is required in the zoning bylaw. The proposed development will change the commercial designation portion to urban residential through a site-specific official plan amendment. And the change for zoning of the whole site will be from service commercial and residential type 5 to urban residential type 4 to allow these townhouse developments. There are a few special provisions are requested. Among them, the applicant requested a relief of maximum building height, that is from 11 meters to 12 meters, parking space on front and exterior side yard, and a relief of landscape requirement at the front yard. Through Mr. Chair, we have received various reports and supporting documents for this proposal. Among them, we have reviewed a planning justification report, a traffic impact study, the collected data from 14 September 2021, and I believe there'll be some further study in May 2022 as well. A functional servicing report, and a D-series compatibility and noise assessment. So just like the previous application, the D6 analysis report concluded that there are few industrial uses at the east side of the development. Waterfoot track and trailer, a commercial track repair shop is located to the west side, and it is 70 meters away from the proposed development. Noise impact prediction from surrounding commercial operations and road traffic noise indicate that road traffic is the dominant noise source during the day, evening, and nighttime. Typical operations associated with track servicing repair could result in noise emission from power tools and equipments. With those findings, the report proposed that noise fencing on the southwest portion of the property for noise control, triple pane windows for all units to control the noise, and air conditioning for all recommended units facing the west of the development. Staff will further review this report and provide comments in the recommendation report. So, Mr. Chair, we received technical comments for this development, and just like the previous one, the staff found the similar low fire flow data for this development, and also confirmed that water allocation will not provided during this application process. We received a significant number of public input for this development as well. The concerns are pretty similar like the previous one. Mostly it is related to the stormwater management concerns within and outside the property, impact of existing wildlife on the existing pond, which will be removed, high density and use impact, architectural quality, building materials, location of the existing of the proposed buildings. Further concerns are reduction of commercial use and potential loss of employment, potential increase of traffic, lack of parking facilities on public street, concerns about adequate buffer, and servicing capacity of the county. So The next step is we'll wait for further information about traffic impact study and any further revisions of drawings and reports. Staff will further review the documents and put forward the recommendation report in the future council meeting. That's everything from me, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. Any questions from committee for staff? Seeing none, you must be getting better at this, Mohammed. They have no questions this time around. So thank you very much. We will move on to, we do have the owners and their agents here registered. Now, Mr. and Mrs. O'Hara, are you, do you want to make a presentation, or are you just here to answer questions?
Good afternoon. We'll let Eldon speak on our behalf first, and I'll be here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Darbison, you have a presentation for us?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. Okay, all right, next slide, please. So I'm Eldon Darbison. I'm the registered professional planner working with our clients, Verlinda Homes. Next slide, please. So this development, what are we proposing? This development is called Orchard Square. The proposal that was submitted is a 55-unit residential development that adds 4 unit types to Waterford. It is located on the periphery of the existing neighborhood. It's broken down into 19 1- and 2-story dwelling units, which are located around the periphery of the site, and then 12 1-story stacked, combined with 24 3-story stacked units central to the site. This slide shows a slight modification which removed parking from the exterior side yard along Old Highway 24, and we've removed 2 units in the central part of the site. This is again, while we're working with the citizen group of the Yin subdivision. There is one access proposed onto Old Highway 24 and another access onto Lamb Boulevard. The design includes boulevard area landscaping with increased setbacks from Old Highway 24 and the intersection of Lamb Boulevard. And this development also becomes a gateway feature to the Send of Waterford and the Yin subdivision, with emphasis on landscaping near and into the public realm. Next slide, please. So what's permitted now? This is, as Mohammed mentioned, with the zoning, how it's broken down. It permits a 5-story residential apartment building and service commercial uses. There's a very large parking area to serve both the commercial and residential components of the development. Some of the less compatible uses of the service commercial zone include things like lumberyards, restaurants, bars and nightclubs, gas stations, automobile service repair stations, amongst other uses. These kinds of uses are parking intensive and they can require outdoor storage. You can see from the plan there's far less landscaping, and commercial development is draw more traffic. So and similar to the previous application, this is it's a subject to site plan. This can proceed today without public process. So we're here to speak to a residential development. Next, please. So these are the next 2 slides are about perspective. So this is a perspective of a development looking southeast from the intersection of Lamb Boulevard and Old Highway 24. You can see that it captures some large setbacks to the existing roadways. Next slide, please. This is a perspective looking from the southeast corner on the lands towards the intersection of Lamb Boulevard and Old Highway 24. So this better captures the various heights of the 1-story and bungalow units around the periphery lands. We did design that for improved compatibility and transition into the existing neighborhood. And then towards the center, you can see that the 3-story units, and they're strategically positioned in the center of the development along an internal promenade to ensure that the the compatibility and the transition between the neighborhoods and within the site itself. Next slide, please. We had discussed traffic. There was concern about traffic. Mr. Valley had mentioned these projections have been made to the year 2040. They confirmed that we're not coming close to triggering road improvements. We will review and recount the data that allowed the consultant to come to the conclusions of the report. Next slide, please. And this development also formed part of our discussions with the Yin Subdivision Action Committee. We had spent many hours working with them, exchanging words and meeting and answering questions. The meetings were very well attended. There's a lot of questions and concerns which we've addressed. Some of these concerns for this particular development were regarding buffering, landscaping, and height. The type of ownership being condominium versus freehold, servicing, snow storage, etc. We've made modifications to accommodate a lot of the concerns from the Action Committee. In fact, some of these changes include removing a couple of the dwelling units, relocating the parking from the exterior side yard shown on that previous revised landscape. Site plan, and we've also been able to increase the landscaping as a result of those changes. The developers, in concert with the proposed development on the north side, have agreed to extend the sidewalk up Old Highway 24 towards the Esso station, and we have all worked very well together to address a lot of these concerns, and the response overall has been very positive and supportive, and we're thankful to the group for that. Last slide, please. It is a large subdivision, not subdivision, a development, condominium development. It's very substantial in nature. We don't have a lot of time, so again, we would like to encourage council to ask questions. Both John and I and the owners are available for any questions, and we encourage you to do so. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Eldon. Are there any questions from committee for the applicant or the owner? Councilor Huffman.
Thank you, Chair Van Passen. Through you to Eldon. On the list there, in regards to some of the concerns that the residents from the Action Committee had, I noticed that the last one was ownership. Could you please expand on that?
Yes, so ownership was really important because a condominium corporation has a lot more control over what can happen on site. Actually, Mr. O'Hara can speak to that in far greater detail to me, and I would offer the opportunity for him to do so.
Councilor Huffman, we're a good condominium association will control fees, but also have strong rules and ensure that there is non-street parking and ensure that the residents respect the neighborhood. So that we're going to be the ones writing the condominium documents, and we'll ensure that they are quite strong and are indicative of what we're trying to build.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom.
Any other questions for the applicant or the agent? Seeing none. Oh, Councilor Huffman, you have.
Sorry, I do. I just wanted to clarify. Eldon, when you were talking, you were saying that some of the approved uses at this point in time would be the residential, and you mentioned an apartment building. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. The current zoning on the south side of the development, there's a slide that showed a 5-story apartment building. So that is a special provision on the site today. It's been there for a while, and it could be constructed through a site plan agreement today. So there's no, through site plan, there's no public involvement in that, but it is a permitted use with the zoning today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess this is a question for staff, but what would be, or perhaps Mr. O'Hara, but I'll direct it to staff first. What would be the margin when we look at a 20-year projection before other road enhancements like that left turning lane would be required? What kind of margin are we left with at the end of 20 years, considering that those improvements would then fall at the expense of the taxpayer in 15 years from now? So what would be the disadvantage, while it may not be required at this point in time based on these projections? Let's say that growth increased at a more rapid pace. Why not install them at this point in time so that it's not the brunt of the taxpayers down the road?
So, Mr. Chair, to the mayor, I would probably leave this for the engineering department to provide some comments.
But Mohammed, I think that's more from a staff concern. I can understand Mr. O'Hara doesn't want to bear the brunt of that cost, but again, I'm here to represent the taxpayer. So, you know, if we're talking that there's a narrow margin based on I haven't seen the projections, so this is to staff. If you've seen the projections and it's a tight margin at the end of 20 years, and if you added some level of increased growth to that, then that 20 years might become 15 years. And doing improvements like that do come with a significant cost. Why would we not look for a development of this size to put in those, you know, improved road conditions at this point in time?
Based on
Go ahead, Mohammed.
So, Mr. Chair, based on the traffic report we received, there are some certain limits for the Highway 24 old, and the data we saw from the report is it's not even near to the half, probably around half of what the capacity is. But in regard to keeping ourselves ready for future, what kind of infrastructure development we can prepare, I would leave that for our engineering colleague from the staff to comment on.
Your worship, I think that these are two of the last developments that can be built in the south unless we grow through the growth study. You know, and clearly the 93 or 95 units that we're looking at doing right now don't justify a turning lane. You know, Yin subdivision is built out, and there are 4 arteries, 2 for each of the developments, that are going to release traffic to both Lamb and Old Highway 24.
Mr. Chair, if I can continue, my understanding that I just don't have the map in front of me. Sorry, Tom, I came in from another meeting here. I mean, as far as unless we grow through the growth study, I mean, we all know that we are going to grow through the growth study, and I believe you're advocating for some particular parcels of land to grow. So I think we could all assume that there is going to be additional growth. So I don't know how that would apply. But again, without having the map in front of me, it's hard for me to say. But I just, you know, I look at other developments, a large one that had occurred in Port Dover, you know, they installed a roundabout. That cost was borne by the developer. And although the roundabout isn't required at this point in time, as that development grows into the future, it's going to be required. Again, I recognize that your land may be coming to, you know, an end with this now, but it's also my understanding that you are looking for future projects in Waterford.
Absolutely. You know, and a roundabout is something that we looked at as well. Not necessarily with our engineers, just with Angie and I have discussed it and looked at that could be one of the avenues to alleviate pressure. You know, we're not adverse to looking at options to assist the traffic. I guess I don't see the land being available right now, Your Worship, to accommodate turning lanes. But certainly a traffic circle would certainly assist.
So to be clear, I wasn't suggesting a traffic circle. My point was just more that the developer bore that cost at in that case. And so what I just don't want to see after the fact is further lands be as we do go through an urban boundary expansion and other lands are brought in, that again, that this, you know, falls to the county in 15 years from now to address. I mean, I think one of the things that Norfolk County needs to start doing is being proactive as opposed to reactive. And, you know, this might be a good place to start with that.
Certainly.
Any other questions from committee? Seeing none, thank you all for your presentation. We do have a few members of the public listed here to be speaking.
Mr. Chair, may I just add a point of clarification that might help address that traffic concern, if I may?
Go ahead.
All right. So, the traffic study talked about the projections to 2040, and even then, the road capacity is still predicted to function at 50% of the total road capacity. So it definitely was looked at.
I don't think I want to speak for the mayor, but I think he was getting to the point that there's other development going on in and around Waterford that will also add traffic to those same roads, and we got to look at the big picture.
Absolutely.
Well, that's correct, and not just other development by other developers, but by this developer in particular that I know has expressed an interest in continuing additional developments in that area.
Okay, so we have Mr. Harvey. You are listed as a speaker on this application as well. You're still muted, sir.
Okay, somebody obviously has made an error. I only wish to speak on the one property on the northeast corner, which I have already spoken on. But I will say this, if you can still hear me. Can you? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I will say this. One of the suggestions I would have had, I wanted to focus on a very narrow content, which I did. But expanding from that, the suggestion of a roundabout is, I mean, you've only got three options. You got a three-way stop sign, you've got a roundabout, or you have lights, which are expensive to install and maintain. Once you put in a roundabout, and the lack of land seems ridiculous to me when there's plenty of farmland and other property on all four corners, which if you had to, you can expropriate, I think. So I would think a roundabout shared by the two developers definitely would alleviate any further cost to the town, like the one councillor said at a later date. I would definitely look at that. Thank you very much.
Okay, and thank you. Now, I will try Mr. Bedford. Are you listed as a speaker on this one as well?
I don't know if I'm listed, but I did intend to, I did hope to make a presentation. If I might.
5 minutes then.
Thank you. Again, Mr. Chairman and members of the Public Hearing Committee. My name is Stephen Bedford. I'm the Principal Planner for Landex Developments. And myself and Dan Romenko, an urban designer with Better Neighborhoods, have been providing advice to the Neighborhood Committee since the beginning of April. And rather than rushing through the presentation that I presented for the previous development, much of the introduction to the previous development would have been restated. The role of the Neighborhood Committee, the fact that Dan and I have not been, while we provided advice, have not been directly involved in the meetings with the development community. And really, I'm here to present the position of the committee and feedback from Friday's community meeting. One of the thoughts that I did have, though, in terms of both properties to the north and south of Lamb, that the proposals that are being presented as alternatives as a result of the existing zoning, I think are worst case scenarios. I think in each case coming forward in 2022 or beyond, those proposals will change significantly because of market market demands, and you will be faced with other types of development rather than these worst case scenarios that have been presented before you. In any event, the committee and the community concerns with respect to this development are as follows. With respect to density, the owner has agreed to include the number of units 53 in the zoning bylaw. That's a reduction from the existing 55 that was proposed. But notwithstanding the approval in place for the apartment building, as a result of the meeting last Friday, it became clear the community still feels the density is too high. The committee, during its initial review, thought 3 stories might be appropriate. And again, at the community meeting, it became clear the community feels 2 stories is a more appropriate height. In the exterior finish, the owner has agreed that the exterior materials on the proposed buildings will be consistent with the building materials of the homes in the subdivision: brick, stone, and high-quality composite materials. It is understood that this requirement will be embedded in any approval documents. And again, the community wanted to restate their concerns with traffic at Laminol 24. There's been significant discussion about that, and I'm sure the county will be dotting their I's and crossing their T's with respect to the technical implementation of good traffic movement at the south end of Waterford. Sidewalks are an important community amenity, and the committee is pleased the owner, along with the property owner across on the north side of Lamb, have agreed to share the cost of extending the sidewalk north to connect with the existing sidewalk along Old Highway 24. Sidewalks should also be provided along Lamb to connect with this new sidewalk. With respect to buffers, the committee was initially surprised to see that the proponent had indicated that the county agreed that a landscape buffer may be provided on the road allowance rather than on private property. In my experience, this was not an appropriate solution. Landscape buffering for parking is best located on the subject property, as it is part of the owner's responsibilities. The owner has subsequently agreed to move the Old Highway 24 buffer onto their property and create a 3-meter buffer on their property. A similar change continues to be recommended on Lamb Boulevard. The buffer should be provided on the private property. And with respect to urban design, the community questions the practicality of the central promenade provided in this development, providing either an appropriate green space for the units facing the sidewalk promenade, or a comfortable connection for the units to the proposed allocated parking spaces. Again, we've talked about servicing capacity, and the owner has agreed to continue to provide the sufficient information to illustrate that water and sewer will be available, and that the stormwater management will be appropriate and will not impact adjacent properties. And again, the concern, the opportunity, if the site plan agreement or site plan application was before you, an approval of the site plan agreement in fact confirms what council would see on the ground in the future. It would
summarize, Mr. Bedford.
Yes, thank you. And those are my comments. We've worked well with the proponents so far, and the committee looks forward to continuing to meet with the proponent so that when a recommendation comes forward, a fully supportive plan can be presented.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Seeing no hands up, we have one more deputation, Wendy Franco.
I think pretty much everything I was going to say was said by the previous 2 gentlemen. So at this point, I don't think I have anything further to add.
I think our committee appreciates that. It's been a long day. And Mr. O'Hara, we'll give you the final word on this if you want to add a few minutes worth of comments.
Thank you, Councillor. I just want to reiterate what Eldon and John has said in the past, that this land was for sale for 11 years. And, there was a commercial space that in the Foodland Mall that sat vacant for the better part of a year before it was leased out. We have the ability right now to build 44 condominium apartments and build 14,000 square feet of commercial space. When Angie and I bought the land, we took a look at the existing zoning, and we just didn't think it fit in with Yin and the subdivision. So that is why we are proposing our condo apartments. We feel that through the growth study and our concession 7 development on the north end, we're going to have 17 acres of commercial development and more than adequately support what Waterford wants and needs. But thanks very much, Mayor and Council, and we look forward to coming back to you with our zoning amendment in the near future.
Okay, and thank you very much to all the deputations. Any questions or comments? Councillor Columbus?
Yes, one to the developer, Tom. How soon are you expecting to see some soil and dozers moving on the site?
I think that less than a year. We would have liked to be in the ground by this fall. Obviously the market is still very strong, and we'd like to capitalize on that. But we've got a special situation here too. Is that Mayor and Council asked us to deliver on some attainable housing, and we've got 11 spots for seniors or singles here in the stacked townhouses. They're 750 square foot 1-bedroom apartments. And, the sooner we can bring those to market, we've got several aging females who have come to us because they've heard we're building these, and we'd love to be able to afford those to the public by about this time next year.
Thank you.
And Mayor Chop.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I guess, Tom, just one question before we wrap this up with you. In terms of the growth of the downtown, so if you're putting seniors that are, in some of these units, when we look at, a secondary plan that went on with Port Dover and how the town's going to, accommodate that the required commercial space for that growth. We don't have that plan for Waterford, but I think as somebody that's looking to engage in future development in Waterford, you must have a bit of an idea here of what you envision. So, we see the downtown is built out. Where do you see, the worst thing that you can do for a community is what we've seen here in Simcoe, where you had your downtown core and then you went out and you built out all your big box stores on the Queensway, and it's the classic story of ruining downtowns is what happened all over North America. So as we look to a town like Waterford, so that doesn't happen here and we don't end up with commercial development in the future as the urban boundary expands and these lands are developed, and then we end up having, let's say, I'm just throwing this out there, hypothetical, commercial that is separated between the downtown core, and then you've got all your residential development that's happening there, and then the proposal is to have commercial way down on concession 10, and we're splitting up the downtown as opposed to maintaining that core. What would you have to say about that? That's one of the concerns with switching this from commercial to residential.
Sure. I guess, first of all, we're trying to ensure that our existing commercial is walkable for our residents, and we having the Foodland Mall and the gas station and a couple of pizza places, it is accessible. I feel that the downtown is having a resurgence of late. We're seeing some of the buildings being bought up, Mayor Chop, and renovated, and we think that downtown Waterford is looking better and better all the time. We feel that through our silos development, we're going to have some main floor commercial, and again, the downtown will be walkable from the silos, and really from Villages of Waterford, our existing development, we're 500 meters to Alice Street, and we think that our connectivity is awesome, and we want whatever we put in concession 7 in the north end. We want to ensure that it complements downtown and it doesn't hurt any existing developments or retailers. you're the one who said that to me probably 2.5 years ago, is make sure we don't hurt downtown. And that's certainly we're going to complement, we're not going to bring anything in that hurts any existing businesses.
Go ahead, Mary.
No, I agree with that. However, my concern is just more as we look to, some of the proposed future development that I know is being lobbied for right now. How do you accommodate, if Waterford grows that much, is the downtown going to be enough to support that commercially in the future? I mean, if all of the homes that you'd like to build in Waterford come to fruition, is that food land going to be enough to support that? So my concern is more, and I appreciate the fact that you took those concerns in and not taking away from the downtown, which is going to get us through the next X number of years. But as we look to designing a community for 30, 40 years from now, how do we not screw this up 40 years from now? How do we ensure that as we grow that commercial core, that it's not growing the wrong way, but it's going to remain connected to the downtown so that we don't erode Waterford's downtown in the future?
I don't think we're going to hurt downtown. I think with the number of developments that are on Nickel Street and our silos, with what Spatafor and O'Coin have going on Thompson Road, those are all walking distance to downtown, and I think that downtown is only going to be the benefactor. I mean, if you talk to Kerry Bockenholt, or if you talk to Brushed, they love the fact that we're bringing people into town, and their businesses are being enhanced every year by the additional residents that are buying homes in Waterford. So, I feel confident that we're going to look after the downtown, and that we're going to complement, and that we've got a walkable probably, there's going to be 300 or 400 units that are going to be walkable to downtown that are only going to assist the businesses, the retail businesses that are in place right now.
I guess my final comments would be, again, I think for right now, and even in the next 10 years, I think it's great. I think you're right. The more people you add, the more, vibrant of a downtown you're going to have. However, one of the challenges that Norfolk County has had in the past is they don't think past 10 years. Sometimes I don't think they have thought past 5 years in the past. So now we have run into situations, with water and everything else. But again, I'm not looking at this in terms of the water component. That's a separate issue. What I'm concerned about is, good land use planning for 30, 40, 50 years down the road.
And the concession 7 is going to be a master plan community. And it's a 20-year build out, Mayor Chop. It's not for the faint of heart. It's quite a large development. And we know that we need to have a certain amount of services right away, because if we don't build the commercial retail services at the beginning, we're not going to be successful with our residential developments.
Okay, thanks very much. And seeing no more questions from the committee, thanks everyone for your deputations and your information. And staff will take that all back to write their final reports. And does anybody wish to move the staff recommendation or propose an alternative? Councillor Huffman and Councillor Taylor seconds. All in favor? That is carried. The last item on my sheet here is, could I have a motion to adjourn? From Councillor Huffman, seconded by Mayor Chop. All in favor? That is carried. And we do have a special council meeting coming up, but do we want to take a 15-minute break? Mayor Chop, would you like us back here at like 6:40? Well, 6:35, thank you.